Sammy showed up in a cloud of dust, all long legs and sensuality. We barely made it inside before we lost our clothes. For the next 3 days, the only time she dressed was when we went to town. She got a nice, all-over tan lying by the pool. Life went on seamlessly for the next 5 months. Sammy was nearly done with school. It was only an associate degree, but she would be the first in her family to earn one. Her dad was long gone. No one knew where. I liked her mom, and she liked me. She was always telling me what a positive impact I was having on Sammy. When we reached the end of our agreement with Soundwave, Jimmy and I took the keyboard player with us and changed the band name to Half Irish. We were very popular, especially in Crockett. We played there so much that Crystal was urging Jimmy to move. Moira all but never mentioned her husband anymore. Sammy continued to ignore maintenance schedules for the March 1st, so I would drive it once every 2 weeks, just to keep an eye on it. About a month before our wedding date, I took it to have the oil changed. Sammy was messy, so I took it to be detailed. When I picked it up, I noticed my mini recorder lying on the seat. They had found it stuck under the shifter boot. I carry one in every vehicle, so when I get an inspiration, I can record it. It works out well for me. This one had lain so long the battery was dead. I put it in my pocket and took it to my office, where it lay for several days. One day I decided to check it to see if I recorded anything I wanted to follow up on. I replaced the battery and hit play, listening while I replaced the strings on my newest acquisition, a Fender precision bass. I preferred short-scale basses, but this one was such a good deal I couldn't pass it up. It would soon be up for sale. It was my usual rambling, but I had recorded a bit of lyrics that sounded promising. Suddenly I heard the sound of 2 doors closing and the rumble of the engine. I grinned. Sammy must have accidentally switched it to voice activation. I was about to hear what kind of music she played. Instead, I heard a male voice. "Damn, this is a nice ride. When do I get to drive it again?" Sammy's voice broke my heart. "Anytime you want, honey." Wiley's up in Crockett with his red-haired 304. We got until Sunday afternoon. "Do you really think he's sleeping with her?" "Not really, he's too much of a Boy Scout. But the bitch has the hots for him. I can see it in her eyes. I just keep making accusations to keep him on his toes." I recognized the voice. Gary Slickhair Smith, her boss. "Enough talk," said Sammy. Suddenly, all I could hear were grunts and squeals, then a steady noise. Son of a bitch. She must be blowing him right over the recorder. I could hear his grunts. He yelled out, "Baby, you're so good." Soon she was giggling. "Enough warm up. Give it to me, Gary. Give me a minute. Hurry. I have to be home to answer the phone. He always calls on his last break to tell me goodnight." "Why can't you talk to him on your cell?" "It's a security thing. Sandy messed him up pretty good. It makes him feel better knowing I'm at home when he calls." "Well then, let's go. You can tell him how much you love him while I am screwing you." "No, never in his house, and especially his bed. I owe him that much." "If you feel that way, why are we screwing around?" "Because he's gone a lot, and frankly, I'm a bit oversexed. But let's be clear here. I actually love him. You're just for fun. And when we get married and he gets a job keeping him home, playtime is over." "Over? Never again?" "Well, maybe not forever. I'll still have a high sex drive." The bitch was giggling again. "Ever thought what would happen if he found out?" "He won't. I would never do it to him while he's around. We've been together at clubs, but we always come separately and I never leave with you. He knows I go out with my friends while he works, and he doesn't have a problem." She paused and thought, "I guess. If he does find out, I'll claim loneliness and alcohol. Besides, after we get married, he'll have too much to lose. He hasn't said anything about a prenup, and he left his file cabinet unlocked." I snooped. "My little coyote is rich, baby. More money than you'll ever have. And half of it will be all mine. Now, we're on a time limit. Let's start loving." I heard the doors slam, and then noises. Sounded like I needed new shocks. 15 minutes later, the doors opened and closed again. "Damn, baby, that was great." I could almost see him smirking. Then I heard a noise. Sammy was cooing. "Honey, don't start again. I've got to get home." I carefully put the recorder in my safe. We had been living together for almost a year. The wedding was in 5 weeks. Not that it was going to happen now. I sat and wondered. What was so wrong with me that I couldn't keep a woman? Then the anger kicked in. The bitch was gonna pay, somehow. And old slick hair was gonna get his too. Damn. What the hell is so wrong with me that I can't keep a woman? I think I'm a good person. I'm not cruel to people or animals. I pay my bills, donate time and money to charities, help my friends when they need it. When I decide to love someone, I do it heart and soul. Apparently that's not enough. I did what any mature adult male would do under the circumstances. I cried to my mom. Dottie knew something was wrong the second she saw me. What's wrong? Is something wrong with Sammy or your friends? You look lost. I told her the whole miserable tale. At first she was sympathetic, then she got angry. The nerve of that bitch. I'm gonna chew her when I see her. It almost made me laugh. Mom didn't use profanity, and I never heard her say an ill word about anyone. Don't bother. I'll take care of it. She's history. I'm just glad I found out before we tied the knot. I want payback. I just need to figure out how. Mom brought up a good point. She's lived with you for almost a year. You need to check with your lawyer for legal ramifications. I don't know if palimony could come into play. Be careful, son. You don't want to lose anything over this. Her advice was good, as usual. My lawyer was an old college friend. He was pre-law while I knew him, and heavily into music. He could even play trombone. Not a rock and roll mainstay, but he was pretty good. You should be okay. All she has contributed seems to be paying the power bill and splitting the groceries. She didn't help with the mortgage. You don't have one. Same with car payments. Judging from the pay stub you brought me, she is capable of paying her own bills. Unless she has some agreement in writing, you're safe. You did furnish her a car, but from what you tell me, you made it pretty plain that the car was an investment and subject to be sold anytime. Thanks to your almost retentive habit of saving receipts, you can even prove that you maintained her car for a while. Just don't do anything stupid that would open you to litigation and you'll be fine. My best advice? Move her out fast, change the locks, and get on with your life. If she makes any noise, refer her to me. That restaurant is part of a chain. Corporations don't like scandals or bad publicity. Offer to help set her up in an apartment for old time's sake if she doesn't make waves. It'll be cheaper than my fee if she tries something, and it'll look good on paper. Then he leaned back and grinned. Look at the bright side. Now that you're a free agent, you can start chasing that hot woman in your band. I sighed. The only drawback to that plan is her husband, and I don't break up marriages. Damn, Wiley, your life sucks, doesn't it? Despite his smile, I heard the ring of truth. I agreed with him. Yeah, pretty much. On top of everything else, business-wise, I was extremely busy. We were booked solid for weeks, right up until the week of the charity concert. We had been meeting, working up playlists, and rehearsing on Sundays. We had some pretty good discussions, for lack of a better word, over the playlist. Opinions were loud, definite, and hard to negotiate. Most of the time I had headaches trying to play ringmaster. We were doing what most bar bands fantasize about, playing what we wanted for a large audience. Phil Spector was pretty much a miserable human being judging from the articles I had read about him, but there is no doubt that as a music producer he was a genius. His trademark wall of sound was responsible for many hits in the 60s. We were trying to emulate that. Horns, strings, layered musicians, the whole ball of wax. The crowd we expected to attract would be over 30, more like over 40, and we wanted to play music they were familiar with. If they were happy, they were much more likely to donate, and that was why we were there. The chamber quartet recruited most of the college to help. The broadcast journalism students, the business students, and others got their professors to treat it like an extra credit, real-world work experience project. I had a budget to play with, mostly for advertising. All labor was voluntary. The broadcast students quickly became sound, lighting, and stage crew. They arranged for the whole thing to be broadcast on local access on a one-day delay, with the 800 number for contributions flashing constantly. The business students were in charge of advertising and promotion. All the music majors wanted involved, but we had all the musicians we needed, and they couldn't match our schedules. I knew I had to do something about Sammy. I avoided her, using the benefit as an excuse. It helped that we had a 2-week gig up in Crockett, playing at a bar called the Black Dog. Crockett was a college town, Mountain State University, but the Dog was more of a hangout for locals. We were well known, so there was an influx of college students. Most got along, but they had some huge bouncers, just in case. Jimmy, Al, and especially Moira could tell something was off. When they asked, I told them it was personal stuff I needed to work through, and they left me alone. We didn't play on Monday and Tuesday, so Jim, Al, his boyfriend, and Crystal went sightseeing. The kids were at the grandparents', giving Jim and Crystal a little alone time. Crystal was hinting around that she would like to see him settle down to a steady job. He had gotten laid off, as had so many others, and money was tight. They also thought Crystal may be pregnant again. Things were a little tense. Moira hadn't mentioned her husband at all for a month, but she still wore the rings. Apparently he traveled a good bit, and they were used to being apart. When I told them I was going back home to work on the benefit, she wanted to come along to help and check on her house. The ride was quiet, each absorbed in personal thoughts. When we hit town, I surprised her by going to my office instead of the house. "Aren't you going home first?" she asked in surprise. "Not right now. I've got too much to do, and this is where my notes are. Come pick me up in a couple of hours, okay?" She just looked at me. "I know you, Wiley, better than you think. Whatever you have going on, when you decide to tell someone, I'd like to be that person. You're not Smiling Wiley anymore, and I miss him." After the emotional goodbye we had at the festival back in July, we had avoided touching each other, so I was taken aback when she kissed my cheek. "You're a good man, Wiley," was all she said before she pulled off. The Smilin' Wiley Orchestra. That was the name they voted to use. It was a combination of the fact that I was pretty much responsible for the whole ball of wax, and I enjoyed it so much I had a permanent smile on my face. The drama department designed the stage. A large open area in the middle, a raised platform for the horns on the left, and one on the right for the chamber quartet. 23 musicians, 3 drum sets, 4 keyboard stations, 5 guitarists, 3 basses, 59 microphones, a mountain of amps and sound equipment, part or all being in use at the same time. 23 earbuds so we could monitor ourselves and get stage directions. It was a sound technician's nightmare. We had 3 guys for lighting, 2 for sound, 2 stage managers, and 5 stagehands. Add to that the videographers, and it could definitely get crowded. We were gonna have a ball. I watched her leave, thinking about the Smilin' Wiley comment. When everyone got together to format the benefit, a lot of ideas were tossed around. It was a concert as much as a performance, and one of the drama students suggested we emulate the orchestras of the 40s and 50s. We also had too many individuals and groups to list, so we had to come up with a name. They chose it, not me. The stage guys even built stands with the initials SWO running down the front, and the O was a smiley face with the lips and tongue from the old Stones logo. I took the Mach 1 away from Sammy, saying while they were changing oil they discovered some engine problems, and it may have to be rebuilt again. It was bullshit, of course. I had hidden it in one of my empty garage units. She wasn't a complete idiot and knew something was wrong, assuming I was pissed at her over the car. She was trying her best to make up. I left her to her own devices on transportation. She was catching rides with coworkers, and even Slick Hair picked her up a time or two. There was an attempt to get me to help her car shop, but I told her I didn't have time. Just before I left, she asked me point blank what was wrong. I just told her I was dealing with a lot of stress trying to make the benefit a success, and I had recently discovered that someone I trusted had let me down unexpectedly. She looked a little guilty. I told her it was a musician problem, and she let it go. I had been plotting revenge. Cruel, nasty, over-the-top punishment. But as I thought about it, I decided the best way to handle it was musically. It was what I did, who I was. All I had to do was hold on for 2 more weeks. Besides, an old man once told me getting revenge is a lot like wrestling with a pig. You both get covered in mud and shit, and the pig likes it. But it was still gonna be cruel and nasty. During this time, my friendship with Freddie started to grow. He actually called me 2 weeks after the festival to ask about one of the songs we had done. He was thinking about covering it for his next album, and he wanted to use our arrangement. He asked how I thought it would work, and I hesitated. He heard it right away. "Please, Wiley, I have enough yes men. Tell me the truth." So I did. "The song won't be a good fit for you, Freddie, but there are a couple more from the same artist that would. Have you listened to much of his stuff?" He said he hadn't, but would look his work up. We talked a few more minutes, and he had a request. "You seem to have an almost encyclopedic knowledge of music. Try and think up some stuff you think would work for me. I'm open to anything." I had a few I'd already thought of, but I waited a while before sharing them. Thanks to Freddie, 2/3 Irish had 15 seconds of fame. He had crews taping his performances, and they had captured his rendition of Flirtin' with Disaster. Of course, it turned up almost instantly on his Facebook, website, and YouTube. It made us look good. Although Jim and I were just side players, the camera played to Freddie and Moira. It never hurts to have a hot babe in your video. The pictures Crystal had taken of us at lunch and in the river showed up on his website. He insisted on Facebook it was just lunch with old friends during the festival, but there were a few shots of Moira in her one-piece splashing Freddie, and the magazines got hold of it and talked up romance. It got even more improbable when Freddie said on Facebook, not that he wouldn't like to date her, but she was just a friend, and besides, she was married. To me. Apparently he had seen the newspaper article. It took a little while to straighten that one up. Jim told me her husband was actually pissed. Want me to talk to him and clear it up? I guess he didn't have a very high opinion of his brother-in-law. Screw him. It's the most attention he's paid to her in a couple of years. Maybe it'll do them both some good. I repeated my offer to Moira, but she said to forget it. She had already cleared it up. The argument over the playlists were getting out of hand. I finally stepped in and told them to focus on what this was for and get over themselves. But I tried to get most of them placated. Freddie was working on his new record and lining up a new band. His last group were ultimate professionals, but they treated it like a job and didn't invest any emotion at all. This makes for a pretty boring live show. He called and asked if he could come by. His buddy was looking for a guitar and understood I might have what he was looking for. I flipped when he came through the door. I knew who he was instantly but didn't comment. I just plugged the guitar up and handed it to him. He had a small smile on his face as he started playing. Freddie just grinned at me, nodding at a case. I flipped it open and he grabbed my 125, strumming happily. I just went with the flow and grabbed my Fender Mustang bass. We must have played 15 minutes before anyone wanted to stop. I had asked Freddie, so when he said yes, I called Jim and Moira and told them it was life or death. Get there but's over here now. T.A., as he liked to be called, was a nice guy. He wanted the guitar bad, a Gretsch Chet Atkins Country Gentleman, autographed by Chet Atkins personally. Money was nothing to him, but I still gave him a good deal. After all, when he loomed over you at 6 feet 5 inches, long hair falling into his face and talking in that deep rumbling voice, it made you want to be agreeable. We all took pictures of each other, and he really liked Moira. If I didn't know he was desperately in love with his wife, I would have been jealous. Maybe I still was, just a bit. I think he noticed it and said something to Freddie. He just grinned at me and said something back. T.A. seemed surprised, looked at me like I was an idiot, and said something back to Freddie. Don't you hate it when you know someone is talking about you? Well, you're all here. Might as well play something. So we jammed for an hour. I got out the lap steel and we played old country, Hank Williams, Jimmy Dickens, other guys they had no idea I knew about. We even did an old Bob Wills song that Freddie sounded damn good on. Ideas were popping. Of course, it was too good an opportunity for Freddie to pass up. So with permission, he posted pictures apologizing for lack of sound, but thanking his good buddies 2/3 Irish for hosting again. Sammy was furious with me when she found out. Two of the biggest names in country music, and it didn't occur for you to call me. I bet you called that red-headed 304 quick enough, or was she already there? This was about 2 days after I found out she was cheating, so I wasn't too concerned with her feelings. I'm about sick of this shit of ranting about Moira. We have a professional relationship on top of being really good friends. Do I accuse you of improper behavior when you study with Gary? They say people with a guilty conscience make accusations. Anything you need to tell me, Sammy dearest? I couldn't quite keep the anger out of my voice. She backed off instantly, looking nervous. I'm sorry, honey. She's just so pretty, and you're with her more than me. I trust you, really. And you know you can trust me, right? I wanted to take that lovely, double-jointed body, tie it into a knot, and bounce it off the wall a few times. It took everything I had to regain control. Yes, honey, I know quite well how trustworthy you are. But I'm sick of you bitching about Moira, so give it a rest. You understand? Calm down, babe, please. I'll never mention her again. I'm sorry I'm so bitchy. Being without a car and trying to finish our wedding details is stressing me out. I accepted her apology, but didn't make much effort to cuddle or talk afterward. She got the message and left me alone. I had heard an R&B version of Walking After Midnight, the great Patsy Cline tune, when I was much younger. It stuck with me. It would pop in my head from time to time, and I would fool with it. Part of my garage was converted into a recording studio with an almost obsolete 32-track system. I had a friend who was an electrical engineer and singer and rapper who tweaked the system as I had the money, so we could get a pretty good product out. We actually did demos for people, mostly CDs for fellow bar bands to use for attracting business. Mel, the engineer, would also videotape performances to accompany the CD. We overlay the basic soundtrack with horns, faked on my keyboards, and a screaming slide guitar lead. Backing vocals that had an almost doo-wop feel. It sounded like Western swing on jet fuel, but it worked. I just needed a vocalist who could do it justice, and it wasn't me. Moira would have been a good choice. In fact, we did a version in some of our sets, but the way it was set up called for a man's voice. I sent it off to Freddie, who played it for his producers, and they all agreed it would be great for him. A country classic with a new, modern feel. It would be the lead-off single off his next project. He was bubbling when he called. Man, that was great. Can I get your band to back me in the studio? Duh. The chance to work on an album with a singer destined to do great things? Gee, we would have to think about it for a while. And of course, we would get credit and get paid. He called about every other day. What did I think of this song? Would that sound good with horns? His biggest concern was originals. He used some of the most talented songwriters in country music, but was having trouble getting a signature song, something fans would automatically identify him with. What he had done so far was good, but almost generic. You could almost interchange any new singer with the material and nobody would notice. It was very frustrating. Damn, Wiley, you know almost every musician in 3 states. Isn't anybody out there writing? I'll listen to anything. You just never know. Well, since you asked, I sent him one of mine. I made phone calls, set up rehearsals, checked on advertising, tried to get 3 days worth of work done in 2 hours. I took a break. There were some things packed in a corner. I wanted to move to another unit for more workspace. Nothing valuable to anyone but me. My grandmother's rocking chair, my dad's old stereo and albums, 2 or 3 boxes of children's books she used to read to Chip, and probably me when I was young. They were dog-eared, worn with use and love. I planned on reading those same books to my children, even though the odds of that happening was growing less and less. Moira came in while I was sorting and offered to help. I could tell something was wrong, but we had learned to give each other room, so I didn't say anything. She was moving a box of books when the bottom came apart. She retaped the box and started stacking. She picked up a book and just stopped frozen. I Love You This Much, by Sue Buchanan, one of the best children's books ever written, was in her hands. It was Chip's favorite book, read almost every night, especially if Graham was around. She had read it to me at his age. She leafed through it, not really reading. There was something in her manner that spoke of pain. I picked up my old mandolin and started strumming. I had made up a little song based on the book I used to sing to Chip some days when no one wanted to read it to him. I love you this much, or my heart swells at your touch, or I can never get enough, or 'cause I love you this much. I sang softly. There were 4 more verses, but before I could sing them, Moira let out a small sigh and collapsed slowly towards the floor. I dropped my mandolin and grabbed her just before she fell, lowering myself into the rocking chair. Her arms circled my neck, and she put her head against my neck and cried, and cried, and cried some more. I didn't know what to do, so I just held her, rocking gently, petting her as I would a child. Slowly the sobs subsided, and she became quiet. I held her for about 45 minutes, thinking she was asleep. She stirred after a while, then started and jumped out of my arms. She looked shattered, lost, and so alone. I wanted nothing more in the world than to scoop her back into my embrace and tell it was all right, that she was a good person and loved, especially by me. I realized then that I wasn't in love with Sammy anymore. I was in love with Moira, and had been since the first time we played together. Damn, why did she have to be so married? Of course, with my track record, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. Instead of following my instincts, I helped her into the rocking chair and got her a box of tissues. She wiped her eyes, dabbed her cheek, and did a very unladylike job of blowing her nose. It was damn near a honk, and it made her giggle. Want to talk about it? I asked gently. She nodded and got her purse. She pulled a picture out and handed it to me. It was a picture of a child, a red-haired beauty with a beautiful smile. It must have been a Halloween photo. She was dressed as a fairy, in a little green satin dress with gossamer wings. At first I thought it was Moira until I looked a little closer. I looked to Moira for confirmation. She nodded. My daughter, Aaron. She had just turned 4 when that was taken. Where is she now? I was picturing a scenario of a vengeful ex-husband stealing her away. Forest lawn. That picture was taken about 7 months before she passed. Aggressive form of childhood cancer. From diagnosis to passing was only 10 months. She would have turned 7 today. I didn't know what to say. Paul and I were supposed to visit her today. That's why I rode down with you. But he called about an hour after he was supposed to be home. Emergency meeting couldn't be avoided. What could be more important to him than honoring her memory? Damn him. She was sobbing again. Moira, I'll take you. I'm overdue for a visit myself. She tried to stop me, but I led her to the van and buckled her in. The fight had gone out of her. She just stared out the window while I drove. I stopped at a florist and bought 3 bouquets. She noticed the number but said nothing. Which section? I asked as we pulled through the gate. Northeast corner, section C. I parked as close as I could and helped her out. I handed her the flowers I had picked. The florist said it was appropriate for a 7-year-old girl. I picked up the other 2 and told her I would give her privacy. She put her hand on my arm. Please go with me. She looked desperate, so I took her hand and followed her. Forest lawn didn't allow stones, but accepted sculptures. Near her plaque was a small angel, arms reaching heavenward. If you looked close, you could see it resembled a fairy. The engraving said, "To all the small angels." I knew who funded it without question. She talked for half an hour. She apologized for her father not being there for her birthday and said he would make it up to her. She told her about her life and being in a band, introducing me as her bandmate and best friend. She wound up by talking about the flowers. Finally, she told her she loved her more today than ever and that she would be back soon. She kissed her hand and placed it on the plaque, then turned and strode off for a while. She was staring off into the distance, but took my hand when I joined her. "Thank you, Wiley. Now let's go visit your loved ones." I took her to see Mom and Chip, buried side by side. I told her who they were, and before I could stop myself, told her the whole story. She didn't say a word, just held my hand tighter. She was surprised when I laid only one bouquet down. Then I took her over and introduced her to Kara, again telling the whole story. She gazed down for a while, then whispered, "You lucky, lucky girl, getting to love Wiley first. I envy you, but think I understand him better now. Thank you for loving him." We were quiet when we left. "Wiley, just drive around for a little, will you?" I didn't say a word, and 30 minutes later we were at the state park that I had taken Sandy to on our first date. The place was always soothing to me. We sat on the picnic table and watched the fishermen and the families picnicking for a while. She hadn't let go of my hand since we got out of the car. "Thank you for being there when I needed you. Now, please, I can tell you're in some kind of pain. Let me help. If nothing else, I'll be glad to listen. You do it for me. Please, Han, tell me what's going on." I think the Han broke me. So I told her about the last 2 years, first with Sandy, and now Sammy. She was livid. "What the hell is wrong with these women? Does the blood not go all the way to their brains? You're the finest man I've ever met. Kind, gentle, loving, loyal. What the hell is wrong with them? I sincerely hope I never see that look she had on her face directed at me. What are you going to do about her?" She demanded indignantly. So I told her. She looked confused, surprised, and finally happy. "I'm gonna have to reevaluate my opinion of you, but I like it, and I'm gonna help you." She smile she had was not pleasant. Things were rapidly coming to a head, and just when I thought if I had one more crisis to deal with I would blow my brains out, a big one came at me. "Wiley, honey, how are you? I've got a problem I need help with, and you're the first one I thought of. Will you help me, please?" It was Mrs. Miller, my old piano and organ teacher, wife of the man who taught me to play guitar. They were more than teachers, almost a second set of grandparents. He had passed away last year, and I checked on her from time to time. She didn't have anyone else. Her only child and his wife were killed in an auto accident years before. What she had was their son, her grandson, probably the most useless human I had ever met. He was due a trust fund from the accident when he was 30. He was 22 now and a 2-time convicted felon. We lived in a 3-strike state, and I would have bet every guitar I owned he would go down for the count way before then. He was in trouble again. She had gone through most of her savings paying for bail and lawyers. The grandson was an unrepentant druggie and had been caught with a felony amount of crack on him. No doubt about it, he was gone. She was trying to raise bail money, but with his track record, nobody wanted to bond him. She finally found one who would do it, if she put the whole $50,000 up front. If he made his court date, he would refund 90%. I tried my best to talk her out of it. He was her last living relative, and she had a blind spot as far as he was concerned. He had been through rehab twice, as well as several 12-step programs. He would last a month, a week, a day, and be back hustling the street for his next fix. Spending my life in music, I had more than a little experience with narcotics. Not the superstar "I've got money so screw the world" scenario, but the day-to-day, grind out for a living musicians who fell prey to the ready availability. Knew 3 who ended up in jail, 5 that lost everything including their families, and 2 who lost everything including their lives. I had dabbled. I was young, it was available, so I sampled. I didn't like pot because I didn't smoke and it tore my lungs up. Did narcotic once and played so badly, they cut my amp off. I was so messed up I didn't even realize it. I still drank, rarely to excess. Luckily, I looked around, saw what it was doing to my friends, and stopped. Mrs. Myers, or Nani, as she had her students call her, was distraught. "I can't get that kind of money up. What am I going to do?" My first response would have been leave him where he was, but I knew she wouldn't do that. I was afraid she would do something foolish like remortgage her house if I didn't step in. She had something of value, something she didn't even realize she had. Her husband was the one who got me started collecting guitars, and she had a few of them left. "Nani, I think I can help you. How many of Carl's old guitars do you still have?" "I don't know, Wiley. He packed them all up when he got sick and told me to give them to Carl Jr. when he passed. When Jr. died and I forgot all them. They're in the back bedroom still, I guess." They were still there. Apparently the grandson had no idea how much they were worth, or they would have been long gone. Everything he had was top of the line, and he had a lifetime to collect them. He had 5 guitars. The first 3 were valuable, but not rare. On a quick sale, I could probably get between $8,000 and $12,000 for all three. The other two fell into a completely different area. They amounted to the holy grail for guitar collectors. One was a 1953 gold top Les Paul, made the first year they put serial numbers on them. This one was in the low 300 range. It still had the original box and paperwork, and more importantly, it was signed by Les Paul himself, and there was a picture of him in the late 50s holding the guitar. The picture was inscribed with Carl, treat it well, play it often, love the music, your friend, Les Paul. The Les Paul model was actually designed by one of Gibson's engineers. Les was brought into the project pretty late, a 50s version of branding a product. Truth be told, the 53 model wasn't a very good guitar. It was a bitch to keep tuned and wasn't really that playable. This didn't matter at all to most collectors. By 1957, they had taken the bugs out and had a very good product. The other guitar was a 1957 Sunburst Les Paul, also with original paperwork and case. Together, they could bring in the mid-six figures at the right auction. I wrote Nani a check for the first three, giving her full value. I wasn't in this one for a profit. I gave her $50,000 for a 25% interest in both Les Paul models, having my lawyer draw up a binding contract. We immediately shipped them to Sotheby Auctions in London for an instrument sale they had coming up. We insured them for $500,000. She bailed him out, and the judge put in a proviso that he had to wear an ankle bracelet and could not leave town. If he passed the city limits, the bond would be revoked, and he would be back in jail. I had a long talk with the bondsman. Most bondsmen are nice guys if you play by the rules, and this one actually liked Nani. We agreed that in addition to the bracelet, one of his guys would spot check him several times a day, as long as I paid for his time. I thought it was a good investment. This put a serious dent in my ready cash, so I called up a guy who had been bugging me about the Mach 1 and sold it to him for $3,500. I could have probably gotten a lot more for it if I put in one of those auctions you see on television, but one, I needed working capital, and two, I knew it would piss Sammy off. It did. She raised hell. She actually loved the car. Damn it, Wiley. I was hoping you would give it to me for a wedding present. I just smiled, which made her angrier. I told you when you started driving it not to get attached. I needed the money, so I sold it. I'm sure with her knowledge of my finances, she wondered why I needed the money, but she didn't dare ask. When are we going to look for me a car? I need one pretty bad. Tell you what, after the benefit, we'll address your transportation problem. Right now, I've got to focus on that. And our marriage. She all but spit the words out. Oh yeah, I'm working on that, I replied. Suddenly, I was tired. Tired of Sammy, tired of the band, tired of responsibilities, even tired of Moira because I couldn't have her. Most of all, I was tired of me and the continual mess my life had become. I declared an unscheduled holiday and disappeared for 36 hours. I was even tired of driving my van. I actually missed the Mach 1. Changing my voicemail to say I would be unavailable for the next 24 hours, I rented the most powerful Mustang they had on the lot and drove off into the sunset. Actually, since I was heading east, I was driving into the sunrise. There was someone I needed to see. My buddy from college now had a thriving practice in another state. We kept in touch through reunions and alumni updates, so I had access to her number. I called, got her receptionist. She was in a session and would be available in about an hour. I gave her my number and told her to say it was the future father of her children. I know the receptionist was startled, but then I laughed and told her my name. She called back in 50 minutes. Where the hell have you been? My girlfriend has been ovulating for 7 years. You're about to run out of time. We joked and reminisced for a few minutes before I got to the reason I called her. Somehow she didn't seem that surprised. Her day was full, but if I was willing to buy her dinner, she would make herself available. There were hugs and kisses. Got tired of waiting. You slack shit. Soon her spouse said her goodbyes, and we headed back to her office. All right, we're on the clock. Start talking. So I told her about my life for the last 2 years, all of it. When I was done, she just nodded and looked out the window for a second. I'll be brutally honest here. I don't think you were in love with Sandy, or Sammy either. In your head, I think you could hear a clock ticking and felt it was time to find a mate. You wanted to be in love, so you talked yourself into it. From what I hear about your friend Moira, the way you talk about her, you may actually love her. But she's unattainable. Something you need to realize, Wiley, if you're ever going to have a successful relationship, is that you have to give all of yourself to whoever you choose. You can't give her half, or just the parts you want her to know about, but all of you. You can't keep people in little boxes, neatly tagged. Life is sloppy, messy, and you can't control it all the time. Don't get me wrong here. Everybody has secrets. It's human nature. Just keep your priorities straight. If you decide to love someone, Do it with all of your heart and mind. If you get hurt, you get hurt. But eventually, usually when you least expect it, you'll find what you're looking for. And when you do, I expect to hear all about it. I thought about what she said a lot on the way home. I hate when someone tells you something you should have been smart enough to figure out on your own. I also made a standing appointment for once a month. The habits of a lifetime were going to be hard to change. The first thing I did when I got home was try to talk to Sammy. I wasn't going to mention her cheating. In my mind, I had been cheating her by not committing fully. I decided to keep the rental Mustang for a few days, so she would have transportation. She burst out of the house when I pulled up. Her face was flushed and she seemed very, very nervous and angry. Where the hell have you been? The phone has been ringing off the hook. Everybody has been looking for you. I didn't know what to tell them, so I just took messages. God damn it. Why did you turn off your cell? I'm sure it was just a coincidence that I saw Gary's car pulling away as I turned into my street. Her attitude, and seeing his car pull away, altered the forgiving mood I was in. No, I didn't love her anymore. We probably wouldn't have made it even if she didn't cheat. But the fact was she did, and I had a hard time handling it. I had a lot to think about, things I had to work out. I know I should have talked to you, but the fact is I didn't. I'm sorry, I should have, but I feel better now. I actually talked to a professional, and she pointed out a lot of things I need to work on to be a better person. It's been a lot to process. I wanted to have a serious discussion, to be honest with each other, but she chose to attack. Well, that's just ducky. You leave me in the middle, and go out to find yourself. What about me? Maybe I should take a few days and go looking for myself too. What about that? She didn't like my answer. That might be a good idea. Take the Mustang, it's a rental, but it's paid for the next few days. Think about things, like should we continue? We haven't really gotten along lately. Maybe that's a warning. Not what she was expecting, not at all. But she had her temper up. Maybe I will. Maybe I'll find someone else who is interested in a real relationship. He might even have red hair. What do you think of that? I think you should do whatever makes you happy. I bet you won't have to go out of town. I bet you could look a lot closer to home and find that. Maybe you already have. We had been getting progressively louder and hadn't even made it into the house. I'm sure the neighbors were getting an earful. My last statement shocked her. I saw a brief flash of guilt maybe, but she forged ahead. Screw you, she screamed, snatching the keys from my hand and peeling off down the street as I stood there in surprise. That went well, I said to myself as I watched her speed away. I called Jimmy to come pick me up, forgetting he stayed in Crockett. Where the hell have you been? Moria has been climbing the wall, looking for you. Remember, she has your van. Turn your damn cell on, call her, and get your butts up here. We got a show in 6 hours, and it takes almost 4 hours to get here. I couldn't turn my cell on. It was in the Mustang. I called Moira from the house, and she was there in 15 minutes. Red-haired women sure have a way with words. Her butt chewing would have made a drill instructor blush. She got louder, her brogue got thicker. I even believe her hair got a deeper red. When she finally got done telling me what an inconsiderate a-hole I was, she threw her phone at me. Call your mother. She's been worried sick. I immediately called Dottie. Hi, Mom. Sorry I missed your call. How are you? She lit into me so hard, I had to hold the phone away from my ear for about 3 minutes. Moira thought it was funny and that I deserved it. When she wound down, I apologized. Mom, calm down. I left a message saying I wasn't answering the phone for 24 hours. I had things to think about. Nothing is wrong. I'm fine. See you Sunday. Remembering the advice I had just gotten, I told Moira where I had gone and why. I used to think I was a nice guy, you know, but now I'm not so sure. I know I need to work on being a better communicator, that's for sure. She listened but didn't agree. You are a nice guy. You're emphatic, compassionate, and loving. Your brains are a little scrambled right now. At least you're getting help. I could never get my husband to do that after Aaron died. And we really could have used it. Maybe things would have turned out differently if we had. She didn't elaborate and I didn't push it. For the next 3 hours, I gave her the Reader's Digest version of my life. When I got done, she knew more about me than anyone alive other than my parents. She seemed spellbound. When I finally wound down, she had only one thing to say. Wow. Of course, for all my openness, I made her promise to keep what I told her in confidence. We made it back to Crockett with 45 minutes to spare. Jim was about to give me shit, but Moira warned him off. When the show was over, I went to Walmart and got one of those cheap pay-as-you-go phones with an unlimited plan. It wasn't my iPhone, but it would keep me in touch until I could get it back. I had called Sammy every day, but she wouldn't talk to me. So much for my new resolve to be a better communicator. I checked. She did turn the rental in, and they had my phone. Sammy actually did me a favor by letting everyone know as far as she was concerned the wedding was on hold. We were having communication issues. Since she wasn't talking to me and hadn't returned to the house, I had to agree with her. It was the week of the benefit, finally. Everyone involved was keyed up, the rehearsals had gone well, the equipment had been checked. We had been advertised heavily on radio and TV, and a few of us hit the local morning shows to promote it. My band in the horn section actually played a couple of songs in studio, trying to generate more interest. It went so well they played a clip on the evening newscast. Luckily, we had a last-minute addition to announce. Mr. Chance Blaze was going to make a brief appearance and might bring a friend or two. Freddie confirmed this on his Facebook page, saying he wasn't sure which night he would appear because of rehearsal schedules. He did this deliberately, hoping to boost ticket sales. It was a 3-night event, and you had the option of buying a ticket for one performance or for all 3 nights. We had a few tickets given away on radio, but since it was a benefit they were limited. Pre-sales were actually pretty good. Nani's grandson decided to run the same week. He cut his ankle bracelet loose, hoping he could be gone before anyone noticed it. The flaw to that plan was that the bracelet had a temperature sensor built in. If it dropped below body temperature for more than 2 minutes, it alerted the monitor. The monitor went off just as he was leaving the house. The guy who was spot checking for me was already on the scene. He followed the car he was in, calling for backup. In a classic box move, they bracketed his car and forced him over within sight of the city limits. The driver was high and showed mighty poor judgment by waving a pistol around. Bondsmen don't play. They had their weapons out and were in a pretty tense standoff until the police arrived. The driver was arrested for weapons and narcotics charges, along with aiding a fleeing felon. The grandson was arrested for violating his bond and remanded, without the availability of bail. Nani got back 90% of the money, but spent it all on lawyers, even though they advised her to just let it happen. Sammy finally called me on Wednesday morning. She was staying with Sandy, of all people. Seemed she had moved back to town when her lover decided he really wanted to play on the boys' team. She even had her old job back. She wants to talk to you, to apologize in person. Will you let her? I thought that was a conversation I really wanted to have. We agreed that Sammy should stay where she was until after the benefit. I did make her promise to come, and had tickets delivered to the restaurant, including one for Sandy and Gary, telling her she should bring him along as a thank you for helping her. He was just as big a fan of Freddie as she was, and I was pretty sure he would take the bait. I sweetened it by promising to introduce them to Freddie. Freddie surprised me by agreeing to make an appearance, but there were motivating factors. 1, he had a niece with cancer, and 2, he really wanted to record the song I had sent him. I Got a Plan was written when I was thinking about proposing to Sammy. Freddie's whole production team was drooling. This could be his signature song. I didn't tell him who wrote it, but he suspected. This is yours, isn't it? He hadn't called, just shown up. When I admitted it was, he immediately wanted to know if I had more. I showed him my file cabinet and told him there was probably 150 in various stages of completion. I thought he was going to wet himself. He immediately demanded first choice, and I told him we would talk about it after the benefit. After swearing the whole group of us to secrecy, he wanted to debut I Got a Plan during the benefit to gauge crowd reaction. We practiced it 4 times in private, just Freddie, Moira, Jim, Al, me, and Frank, the guitarist from Hard Country. Moira stepped in and totally reworked the music, turning it into a wide-open party song instead of the ballad I envisioned. It was 100% better. I finally allowed myself to get excited about it. Finally, it was Thursday night. After talking it over, we decided to limit the number of tickets to 2,200 and leave a space for dancing. We were all veterans of bar bands and knew that if people wanted to dance, we should make space. It would make them happy, and happy people tended to donate more. A quick ticket count confirmed there were about 1,600 paying customers out there. Not bad for an opening night. We were all seasoned professionals, but the adrenaline level was way up for everyone. Mellow Mel, my engineer or singer or rapper buddy, was MC. He walked onto the stage and under a single spotlight greeted the crowd. Welcome to the show. Thank you all for coming. As you know, 100% of all proceeds go to the Cancer Research Foundation. And if for some reason you feel an urge to donate more, we have volunteers to assist you. Now for the show. We're going to start with a light classical number and go from there. Please, sit back and enjoy the show. A spotlight hit the chamber quartet, stage right on a raised platform. They started the opening notes of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, and the horns joined in, also on a raised platform, stage left. 3 bars and a spotlight hit Moira, and she hit the Chuck Berry chords, followed by everyone on stage as we launched into Roll Over Beethoven. 3 drummers, 5 guitarists, 3 bassists, 3 keyboards, all playing wide open. The crowd loved it. We stretched it out to a little over 10 minutes and already had people on their feet. We didn't stop, just switched over to Rosalita, one of the best Springsteen songs ever written. Next came 10th Avenue Freeze Out, since we were into the Springsteen thing. By now we were interchanging musicians as the song called for them, allowing most everyone to take a breather while keeping the music going. We played a full hour before taking a break. You have to stop once in a while or the audience goes into auditory overload. We had pre-planned it, and at the break all 24 musicians worked the crowd, shaking hands and thanking them for coming. People had already started dancing, so we did a beach music set next. Back to Louisiana, a Delbert McClinton song, Thank You John, oddly enough about a hooker, her pimp, and John, and one of my favorites, Rainy Day Girl, a song written for the Harlem Globetrotter cartoon of the early 70s that actually has two of the Globetrotters singing on it. A few more beach standards and the crowd was shagging its butt off. After the next break we did what we called a girl power set. Moira, Ginny or Gin, Amber from Hard Country, and 3 of the chamber quartet, all women, took the stage. Nodding to the country element they did Passionate Kisses and Feels Like a Woman with the horn section, a version of Girls Talk, Walk Like an Egyptian, and the great rockabilly song by Imelda May, Mayhem, finishing out with Walking on Sunshine. The crowd was roaring by then. We did 5 sets, playing from 8 until about 1:30. The crowd definitely got full value for their money. Everyone seemed happy when they left, so I was pretty sure we would get buzzed the next morning. I was right. By lunchtime Friday, Roll Over Beethoven had been playing on the local access channel almost hourly, along with clips of the girl power set and the beach set. Local TV, radio, and newspapers all gave us good reviews. I did a radio interview, saying that the sets tonight would not be the same as last night. There was a lot of good music we hadn't got to yet. I also hinted strongly that Chance Blaze might show up. We sold out all 2,200 tickets by showtime. The energy was even higher that night. We had gotten the small flaws worked out from last night, and we were almost machine-like in our precision. We decided to give each group a nod and feature them just before and after the breaks. Blue String Theory, the bluegrass band, went first, doing Sis Draper, with me helping with clawhammer banjo. After the break, Hard Country did Drink in My Hand, the Eric Church hit. It had the crowd jumping. The house roared when Freddie walked on stage. He did his best song, then went into 2 Western swing songs. He really sounded great. He had the voice for it. Then he talked the audience up, introducing his newest song, to be released in the next few weeks. This one has potential. Oh, and by the way, it was written by Wiley Patterson and arranged by Moira Stewart, local musicians. Hope you like it. Thanks to Moira, it was a up-tempo, feel-good song. The crowd liked it immediately. It was a song that had a vision of life with his lover. I got the champagne on ice, I got the ring in my hand. When it comes to loving you, babe, and I got a plan. I want the white picket fence and the minivan, 2 dogs and a cat, and all the kids we stand. When it comes to loving you, babe, I got a plan. When we're 80, I want to sit on our front porch, holding your hand, looking back with love, glad I stuck to my plan. When it came to loving you, I was glad for my plan. It was a happy, feel-good song about a young man in love. They loved it. He left the stage to cries of more, after promising to return tomorrow. There was a local entertainment reporter in the audience, and Freddie gave him an interview after the show. He insisted Moira and I be there. Yes, he was excited about the new song. Yes, he would be touring again in about 2 months. He introduced us, saying we were the writers of his song, and would probably be in his band for the tour. This was the first either of us knew about it. Moira was quick to point out that I wrote the song. She had just helped arrange it. I countered by saying without her arranging skills, it would still be a dull little ballad. The reporter laughed and asked how long we had been married. Freddie laughed and said for as long as he had known us. We corrected him, of course. Freddie ended the interview by saying as good as the show was tonight, tomorrow would be even better, and yes, he would be there. He grinned at us when he left, saying we would have a serious discussion soon. The next day, the front page of the entertainment section was all about the benefit, Freddie, his new song, and us. We were sold out before 10 that morning. 6,400 tickets for all 3 nights at $30 a pop. Not too bad. Plus, the owners kicked in all the profits from alcohol sales. We estimated a net of around $30,000, plus any donations we received, made for a pretty successful event. The broadcast students had gone above and beyond, putting together 2 video segments for the last night. We played the first clip just before the second break. Mel set it up. Ladies and gentlemen, before we take this next break, we'd like to take a moment to remember those we have lost. Please join us in this memorial and remember, we have volunteers willing to take any additional donations you would like to make. Everybody Hurts is an R.E.M. song purportedly written for Kurt Cobain. Freddie sang it, playing a grand piano. I was at my B3, and Moira was on guitar. As he started singing, the Jumbotron started showing pictures and videos of loved ones lost to cancer. The ages ranged from a few months to upper 90s, with their names, age, and date of death. By the second verse, the tears started, and by the end, when the strings kicked in, I doubt if there was a dry eye in the house. I didn't know if I would be able to last dry-eyed, so I had on a pair of Ray-Bans. I watched the video of the performance later, and you could clearly see the tears leaking from underneath. Moira had come over and sat on the bench with me while we played, and you could see her tears as well. When the song ended, she hugged me fiercely, sharing comfort and compassion. The last 3 images were of Kara, standing in her wedding dress, and then a split screen of Aaron, a video of her twirling around in her fairy outfit with Chip, playing his ukulele and dancing. I know, he wasn't a cancer victim, but I wanted to honor him, and it made a perfect counterpoint to Aaron dancing. When the last notes faded away, all you could hear was crying. Then the applause started. The donation table stayed busy for an hour. Sammy, Sandy, and Slick Hair were there, sitting at a VIP table. I sent a message that I would be there when I had a break. Moira had agreed to help with my revenge, but she had her own ideas and got most of the girls to help her. She had her own surprises. Red was the color of the foundation we were supporting, and in honor, all the guys were wearing black slacks and red dress shirts, and all the girls had on red dresses, except Moira. She had on a simple, knee-length black dress with red sequins on the bodice. She blended in and stood out at the same time. At the end of the next set, Mel announced the second video segment with audience support. All cancer survivors were asked to wear red to the show. We were in the girl power set, and as they started on Walking on Sunshine, every musician and stage hand went through the crowd, pulling survivors out of their seats and onto the stage. I had gotten Mom and Dad a table as far away from Sammy as I could, and I made a beeline for her. Dad knew what was going to happen and practically pushed her to her feet. I pulled her onto the stage. She was alternately pulling back and laughing at the same time. The cameras were panning around, focusing on Red. Soon the stage and the floor directly in front were crowded with Red. When the song ended, we kept everyone on stage. Mel came out and made a speech. Folks, look around. This is what your contributions are for. Everyone here is a survivor. Because of the treatment and medicines available now, these people will continue to be mothers, fathers, lovers, husbands, wives, brothers, sisters, children, and grandparents. Give them a hand. The applause was thunderous. As prearranged, Mel handed off the microphone off to me. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my mother, Dottie, a survivor. It's also her birthday tomorrow. I know it's hokey, but I love her, so help me sing happy birthday to her. Everyone was in a good mood, so the rafters resounded with the song, while the Jumbotron showed a close-up of Mom, alternately trying to hide her face and fight the tears. At the end, Dad kissed her on one cheek, while I kissed her on the other. She said later it embarrassed her to death, but I've caught her watching the video, especially after Dad passed. She would always freeze it where we were kissing her. I lost control of my revenge on Sammy pretty quick. By now everyone was in on it, and I got stuck playing along. It started during the girl power set, when Moira sang Passionate Kisses. Instead of playing, she just sang. The girls from the chamber quartet had surrounded me. I wasn't paying attention until Moira walked over to where I was standing just off stage. The girls grabbed me and pushed me on stage. Moira held my hand and sang the rest of the song looking into my face, especially the part about passionate kisses from you. The crowd thought it was part of the show and loved it, but I glanced at Sammy and could see the smoke rise. It didn't help her frame of mind when Moira leaned in and gave me a kiss. It was the first time we had touched lips, and I felt the jolt all the way to my toes. The next set was pretty much mine. Mel came over and introduced me as the force behind the benefit. They gave me a nice round of applause. One of the drama students got a dance teacher involved, and she showed us some simple steps. She had the horn section swaying in synchronized movement. She taught me, Freddie, Jim, Frank, and Al some simple Motown moves, emulating the Temptation and the Four Tops. I did Too Proud to Beg, singing lead while the rest stayed with the choreography. It was a riot. Moira flounced on stage with exaggerated movements, and I dropped to my knees, begging and following around. At the end of the song, she gave me a big smile and kissed me. Again, I could get used to this. Next, the girls came on stage to help me with Shake Your Moneymaker. I had a headset mic and a wireless cord, so I had mobility, and when I got to the verse, I got a girl and she just can't be true, I was right in front of Sammy and Sandy. I'm sure each thought I was singing about the other. I jumped back on stage and started my slide solo. I was playing my SG, Jenny had my EBO, and Moira had borrowed Frank's SG, so we coordinated. That seemed to mean more to women. I tend to play with my eyes closed when I really get into it, and when I heard the crowd roar, I thought I was really doing good. Then I opened my eyes. Every woman was on stage, with their back to the crowd, shaking their moneymakers. I nearly fell off the stage laughing. The next song Moira insisted on. As I've said before, I like to take songs and tweak them. Somebody Like You, the monster hit by Adele, one of the best voices I've ever heard, became a target. I replaced the piano with my B3, playing with an intensity that made the melody hypnotic, overlaying it with strings. She heard it while I wasn't aware she was there, and her keen arranging talent kicked in. The stage went dark, and then a spotlight hit Moira, standing in front of a grand piano. I started the song, and the crowd seemed spellbound. Just before the bridge, I started playing the chords softly, and as the piano notes tapered off, I started playing the melody. A second spotlight hit me behind my B3, and I sang most of the second part of the song. I don't have a lot of range, but I do have a talent of infusing emotion into my song. As I sang, I thought about Sandy, Sammy, and most of all Moira. I knew I would never have her, and the pain in my voice was real. She slowly walked over to me, and as the strings came in, we did a duet on the last verse, and as the music faded, she leaned over the organ, pulling my head into contact with hers and holding it into place as the spotlight faded. If you're an entertainer, there are two ways to know you have absolute control over the crowd. One is when they're so loud you can't hear yourself think. The other is when they go absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop. It was like everyone was holding their breath. A few seconds later, a sob broke the silence, and the applause became thunderous in intensity. The lights came back on, and Moira, Al, and I took a bow, waving our thanks to the quartet. Moira had a death grip on my hand. I made no effort to remove it. Sammy looked like she was about to charge the stage. I took a microphone and addressed the crowd. Now that we've managed to depress you, let's try for something totally different. Chance, could you come back on stage? He was surprised, having done all the things we had rehearsed. I caught him singing Pumped Up Kick by Foster the People and gave him hell. He just grinned. Just because I sing country doesn't mean I listen to it all the time. I might be pulling a Conway Twitty. Most of the songs he did towards the end of his career were reworked rock songs. Besides, it has a really good bass line, doesn't it? He was right. It did have a good bass line. We had rehearsed until we felt comfortable in anticipation. Moira dragged him on stage while I started the song. Mel was walking around the stage doing vocal effects, and we more or less shoved the mic in his hands. At first the crowd laughed, but he did a really good job, and the laughter stopped. When it came to the whistling part, Moira had tweaked it with 3 flutes and the strings. We had even learned a little dance that Moira and I did while we bracketed him. He loved it. It was getting time for me to finish my set, so I started my last song, dedicating it to Sammy. The Thrill Is Gone by B.B. King. We gave it the full treatment, horns and strings. I was wireless again, so I stood right in front of her while I sang. At first she was angry, but as I looked from her to Gary, she seemed to shrink. I think she got the message. By now even the crowd could figure out what was going on. I was going to leave the stage, but once again lost control. I had written a song and showed it to Moira. Once again she went in a different, better direction with it. She brought stools out, and once again the spotlight was on us. She demanded I do the song, so I did. How Could You Love Me was written right after I found out Sammy was screwing Gary. It was a song about heartbreak and betrayal, short at just 2 minutes and 20 seconds. I was on a stool in front, and just behind me was Moira with my ES-125. It was perfect for jazz, and she did it in a jazzy, finger-picking style. The only other accompaniment were the horn players, just snapping their fingers in time. As I sang the last verse, I looked right into her eyes. You broke my heart, baby, that's a fact. Love's all gone and it ain't coming back. You say that you love me, I know it's a lie, 'cause how could you love me? How could you love me? Ooh, how could you love me and sleep with that guy? I stood up and Moira handed me my favorite guitar. It's a 1958 Harmony Stratodone, an almost exact copy of the Les Paul Jr. so popular at the time. It was the least valuable of any I owned, just $700 to $900. But the sound was distinct, especially for slide work. I gave $5 for it at a yard sale. Someone had taken a paintbrush to it when the original finish became worn. It took me 2 months to restore it. I walked over to the table while everyone else was setting up. I know about you and Gary. Why didn't you tell me and just move on? It would have hurt me, but I would have respected you. Now, not so much. We moved everything that I knew was yours to Sandy's apartment. If I missed anything, feel free to come and get it. You'll have to call, The locks are changed. Just for the record, the kisses you saw tonight was the only time our lips touched. She's still married, and I won't pursue her. And just so you know, almost all the times I hung out with her were while you were at work, or we were working. I didn't take any time away from us. Can you say the same? Still, you kept the house clean, and as far as I know, never brought him home. I think at one time you actually loved me. I've paid 3 months' rent, and I found you a really good used Camry. It looks a lot like your old one. If you want it, I'll co-sign, but I won't give you any money. I looked over at Gary. As for you, you're a low-life scumsucker. You knew she was engaged. Why didn't you leave her alone? Need another notch in your belt that bad? Wonder what corporate would say about your seduction of someone who works under you. Think they could stand the publicity? He boiled over at the last statement. You son of a bitch. I'm gonna kick your butt. The shithead actually swung. I flipped my guitar, and he slammed into it hard. If you look at the back in just the right light, you can see 3 little dimples. He broke 2 knuckles. He pulled back in pain, and I should have left him alone, but he was a wide-open target, so I slammed the guitar into his nose, breaking it. Damn, I had to retune. I heard later he tried to press charges, but the whole thing was taped from 4 different angles, and it was ruled self-defense. It helped that most of the altercation was caught on audio. Sammy stood through most of this with her mouth hanging open, and just as she was about to say something, Moira and the girls dragged me back to the stage. Just then the opening notes of F You by CeeLo Green rang out. Mel sang it. A spotlight stayed on their table, and every time they came to the chorus, I swear most everyone in the building sang along, just about evenly divided between singing Forget You and F You. They grabbed Gary and fled the building. When it was over, I grabbed a mic. Well, that was interesting. Time for a break. Backstage, I jumped Moira. She didn't seem at all repentant. Whose idea was that? She just grinned. Everyone's, actually. What could I say? The final set. Damn, this had been a lot of fun. We saved some crowd favorites from the first 2 nights and added some new ones. Tell Mama, an Etta James song. Most of us were wireless, and we followed Jenny, who was singing lead, up and down the aisles. We followed that with our trademark, Let It Rock, and everyone was screaming slide, slide. So during her last solo, I took off. Moira was waiting for me. She usually wore jeans. When she did wear a dress or a skirt, she had thick black tights on. When she stepped up on me and I saw she had on thigh highs and a green silk thong, I did something I've never done as a professional. I stopped playing. She hopped off and grabbed my shirt front, hauling me up. Then she gave me the most sensual kiss I've ever had. Then she whispered in my ear. My divorce was final Tuesday. Then she dropped me and sashayed off. I lay in the floor in a daze. Did she really say what I thought she did? Freddie brought me back to reality by shaking me. Wiley, are you okay? Huh? I mean, yeah, I'm all right. Well, get up then, get squared away. Everybody is getting ready for the last number. I got up, swapping my bass for my straightatone. This song had a good slide lead in it. I looked around but couldn't see Moira anywhere, so I took my place. The 3 drummers led us off. Twisting the Night Away was an old Sam Cooke song. When I was about 12, just when I was getting familiar with the guitar, my mom and dad dragged me to a Rod Stewart concert. They were big fans and had a lot of his work, including when he fronted the Faces. They pretty much had everything except his disco stuff. Dad felt he sold out and stopped listening to him for years. When Rod came out and apologized for his disco era, Dad forgave him. Even to a 12-year-old, the music wasn't half bad. He was younger and still had his voice. His finisher was Twisting the Night Away, and it blew the crowd away. When we were trying to find it closer, I thought of it and pulled it up in the computer, finding a clip from the right era. Everyone saw the potential. Old-time rock and roll, using every musician except the strings, and they could be backup singers. I could do a fair Rod Stewart, so I sang the first verse before stepping back to turn my slide loose. Freddie sang the second, then Frank sang the third. We went into the long break, featuring the horns, particularly saxophone. A new spotlight came on, and there was Moira and all the girls, clustered around 2 mics, singing away. We did the last verse, and came to a thunderous finish. The lights went off, and there were call of thanks and good night. We stood in the dark for a full 2 minutes. People started to leave, and then the drums started up and we redid the last verse. When the vocals were over, we just jammed while Mel came on and introduced every musician that shared the stage. Freddie got the most applause, followed by Moira, and then me. Musically, it was the best night of my life. Ever been physically exhausted while at the same time mentally exhilarated? That was us afterwards. Freddie came to me. Man, what a show. Playing with you guys is never dull, but I'm beat. I'll call you Monday. We've got things to talk about. I looked, but Moira was nowhere to be seen. Jimmy said she left right after the show and promised to call Monday. Sammy left word she would like to talk to me also, if I had some free time Monday. I better rest tomorrow. Monday was going to be really busy. I had lunch with Mom and Dad Sunday. As usual, Mom talked and we listened. If Dad had something important to say, he would. But if not, he would let Dottie talk. She gently chewed me out over my failed love life. Then she said better days were ahead for me. She can feel it. I hope so, and she was usually right. I met Freddie Monday morning at my studio. He was bubbling over and had brought his manager and producer with him. The manager just smiled while the producer raved about the show. He went on and on about chemistry and quality. I knew he was leading up to something, so I let him ramble. He finally wound down. Freddie took over. This isn't a strictly social visit, Wiley. I'll get right to the point. How committed is your band in the near future? Our agency handled the bookings, but I had final say. There are some places that for various reasons I refused to play at. Some were dives, some were run by people who didn't like to pay on time, and some I just didn't like, period. We're 3 weeks out that I know of. I'm supposed to call this afternoon and confirm about another 3 weeks worth, but that's tentative right now. The manager stepped in. What we'd like to do is hire you to work on Fred's new album, as well as be his backup band on his next tour. We've got 8 dates we have to honor as a warm-up act, but we're anticipating doing a headline tour after that. We'll go into details later, but we'll pay well, and it could be a tremendous opportunity for you and your band. Wow. Double wow. Fred broke in to try and seal the deal. By your band, we don't mean half Irish. We want the Smilin' Wiley Orchestra, at least most of it. The crowd really seemed to like the Western swing, and we're thinking about doing a tribute to Bob Wills and some of the other pioneers. It won't be just me singing either. I've already got a few more artists interested in doing a song, or at least a cameo. This could be big, Wiley big. And we don't want you as just a musician, we want you to be musical director for the project, and I'm sure you'll bring Moira in to help with the arranging. Think about it for a few days and get back to us. Now, we need to have a serious discussion. This wasn't a serious discussion already? I didn't know what to expect. Apparently it was time for the producer to speak. I've been doing this for 25 years. In that time, if you don't have an ear, you're not very successful. And if I didn't have that ear, I would have been gone a long time ago. I guarantee you, I Got a Plan will be Freddie's breakout record. Platinum, minimum. And your song Saturday, How Could You Love Me, will probably perform just as well. As a matter of fact, we want to record and release it as soon as possible before the tour. I want it done just like you did it Saturday night, down to your partner playing. And one more thing. Fred tells me you have a whole file cabinet full of songs. I want first choice at them. If it won't fit Freddie, well, I produce a lot of acts. If I can't find anyone in-house to do a song you've given me, I have lots of friends that do what I do. One of them will have the right artist for the song. I'm willing to pay a very generous retainer. Think about all we've said and try to get back to us by Friday. He paused for just a second. While you're thinking, let's work on How Could You Love Me? I'd like to have the video out in 2 weeks. 2 weeks? The music business never moves that fast. I wouldn't commit to anything until I talked to Moira and Jimmy. If they came on board, we would recruit the rest later. I called Jimmy and had him get Moira and come over. It was a lot for them to digest. Instead of bars, we would be playing to thousands on a regular basis. True, we wouldn't be the focus, but we would be up there nonetheless. I was single. Moira was now single, so we weren't leaving anyone behind. Jimmy had to sell it to Crystal. It was only 8 dates to start with, but we had to record and rehearse, and we couldn't do it in our hometown. They had 4 kids, not counting the one on the way. Mom, bless her heart, volunteered to help her. She said she would use his kids as practice for her own grandchildren. We would be back from tour 2 months before the due date. They really needed the money and it was a great opportunity, so she came on board. After Jimmy left that Monday, Moira and I had our first serious talk. I started it. You know why Sammy and I split up, but tell me what happened to your marriage. She collected herself, looking inward. We were desperately in love. He was smart, handsome, and on his way to being very successful. We had a plan. 2 kids at least. I was going to be a homemaker, at least until they got older. Aaron was a joy. A quiet, happy baby. We wanted to space them apart, and we decided to wait at least 3 years before we had another. Then his business took off. He started traveling more and more. When Aaron got sick, my whole world collapsed. Because he was gone so often, I had to handle everything myself. When I finally asked him to cut back and help, he agreed. For about 2 months, he stayed close to home. But as Aaron got worse, he started traveling more. I think he couldn't face the fact that she was dying. At the same time, he was insisting we keep to the schedule we had agreed on and have another child. You could see the pain on her face. I couldn't, Wiley. I just couldn't. I was spending every hour with Erin, grieving her impending death, and I just wasn't up to getting pregnant. I think I was afraid if I had another there was a chance that child would get sick too. I think it was the beginning of the end for us. After Erin passed, I just went through the motions for a while. I refused to go off the pill. I was just too afraid. After that, we just started drifting apart. We stayed intimate for a while, but when he saw I wasn't going to get pregnant, he pretty much lost interest. We've worked together for a little over a year, and I hadn't shared his bed for about 6 months prior. Finally, 3 months ago, he flew home, asking him to meet him at the airport. When we got home, he said the infamous words, "We need to talk." He had fallen out of love with me and had met someone. In fact, she was 3 months pregnant. He wanted a divorce. I wanted to feel angry or betrayed, but all I felt was relief. I still loved him, but not like a wife should love her husband. We were very amicable, and he was far more generous than he needed to be. I got the house and enough money to see me living comfortable for the rest of my life. He got to move on and marry his girlfriend. I didn't know it, but he had changed his legal address to Reno. You can apply for a divorce after 6 weeks and get it almost immediately. She moved around restlessly, touching my guitars, taking down my Martin and strumming it for a minute before putting it back. She stopped moving and sat on a stool she had moved so she could be close and watch my reactions. And now the million-dollar question: what to do about us? You know I have feelings for you, and I feel the same from you. It was easy when you were engaged and I was married. We could look but not touch. What happens now? I collected my thoughts. What I said now could determine the rest of my life. Moira, we're friends for a year. I'm glad. With Sandy and Sammy, I just jumped right into love. We both know how that worked out. Now, without any pressure, I've gotten to know you pretty well. I know you hate bigoted people, have very little tolerance for rudeness, and love children. I know you are afraid of snakes and thunderstorms. You stick out your tongue slightly when you're concentrating, and you love to wear black. You know you're pretty, but you don't seem to be vain. You're fiercely loyal to family and friends. Most importantly to me, you seem to have an unending capacity for love. I want that love very badly. Here's what I would like. We're both coming out of flawed relationships. I want to go slow, build on our friendship. In the end, I want you to love me as much as I think I'm going to love you. Does that sound acceptable? She started to answer when I held up my hand. I want just one more thing. If it doesn't work out, if you find you're interested in someone else, tell me up front and walk away. I'll make the same promise to you. She sat on the stool, staring into my face for a minute or so. Then she grinned. I find your proposal acceptable, Mr. Patterson. I'd like to shake on it as friends. She held out her hand and I took it. She didn't let go and pulled me to her unexpectedly, planting her lips on mine and giving me a very enjoyable kiss. She pulled back, laughing. I wanted to shake as friends, but kiss as the lovers we are on our way to becoming. Now, fill me in on the details of our new career. I had my conversation with Sandy and Sammy at the bar where we first met. After greeting my old friends, we got a booth. It was early on a Monday evening, so very few people were around. Sandy started first. God, Wiley, I'm so sorry for the way I treated you. I wish I could take it back, but I can't. Mom was dying, I was vulnerable, and he was very good at seduction. We never had a chance, you and I. I know it's a lot to ask. If you and Sammy are really through, could we go out sometimes? The look Sammy gave her was murderous. I'm pretty sure she didn't expect this. I cut in before she could say anything. I don't think so, Sandy. Too much history. I don't think I could go back down that road. She nodded, sadly. I think she expected my response. Sammy was passionate, eloquent, outlining why we should try again. She didn't take my traveling well. She was jealous of Moira or girls I could meet while out of town. She really did love me. I just nodded. Tell me, Sammy, if we got together again, what would change? I'd still travel. In fact, I've been offered a job that will have me traveling all over the country, not just a few towns over. I'll even be out of the country for 2 weeks. Are you telling me you could handle that? She was nodding vigorously. Yes, I can. I'll be stronger, you'll see. I don't think so. You were cheating on me before I met Moira, so that argument won't fly. But tell me, would you sign a prenuptial agreement, excluding everything except what we would accumulate together? Her eyes widened and she hesitated before saying she would. Money meant nothing. Really? Then explain this to me. I played a copy of the tape I had for them. Sammy slumped afterwards, knowing she was finished. I felt a little pity on her. I'm sorry, Sammy, But the fact is, even if we could get past this, I'm just not in love with you anymore. I hope both you girls find somebody. I'm going to try to. Sometime down the line." They were both sniffling when I left, but didn't seem the least bit interested in consoling each other. In the end, the smiling, wily orchestra consisted of me, Moira, Jim, Al, all 4 guys from Horns for Hire, Frank and Amber from Hard Country, one of the violinists from the chamber quartet, and 2 new members. Celtic Curry happened when an Irish engineer meets an Indian widow with 2 small girls while on a job in India, marries her, and emigrates to the US. The girls embraced the Celtic music their stepdad exposed them to, and started a group with the younger brother that was a result of that union. The brother was following in dad's footsteps and going off to college to be an engineer. One of the older sisters was getting married, so I got Sarah. Her real name wasn't Sarah but was hard to pronounce, so she chose one people could handle. Jenny was at loose ends since her band dissolved, and was a perfect fit. The orchestra had 4 women, 10 guys. If you count Freddie, it was the least likely country band I had ever seen. Of the 14 of us, 9 could play multiple instruments, so if we needed a sound, we could produce it. Rehearsals were grueling but fun. I pretty much set the guidelines, so anybody could make a suggestion, and it would be considered, but the eventual decision would be made by me and Moira, with input from Freddie. It worked. I was wrong about the speed of the music business, or perhaps the ability of his producer, because How Could You Love Me was recorded in 4 days, and the video was finished in 1. Of course, when all you need is 2 stools on a soundstage and 3 spotlights, it is pretty easy. Van Halen spent $650 filming the video for Jump, basically just taking turns filming each other jump around. They probably spent more than that on ours, but not a whole lot more. He was supposed to lip sync and Moira's guitar wasn't supposed to be on, but it came out more realistic to just let them sing and play. He was in a spotlight dead center, and she was sitting just behind him to the left. I was in it. I was one of the guys snapping in time. There was a spotlight on our hands and forearms. The other 3 guys were stagehands. Everything was totally dark except the area under spotlight. Moira insisted I be there because I was the writer. I was actually co-writer and published the song in both our names. I wrote the basic lyrics. Moira wrote the music and suggested a few lyric changes that I agreed bettered the song. It eventually peaked at number 3, his highest charting to date. I Got a Plan was huge. 9 weeks at number 1, in the top 20 for 31 total. The man behind the video was a certified genius. It started out in a small cafe for the proposal, with Freddie and an attractive actress. It switched to an empty lot where a house literally sprang from the ground. It was a modular house, moved to the site and assembled. It took 5 days, and that was just rushing a shell up. While he was singing about the white picket fence, it appeared in sections, and when he got to the line about 2 dogs, a cat, and all the kids they could stand, first the dogs and cat appeared on the porch, followed by 2 boys and a small girl, each holding a pet. The scene changed and the house was surrounded by mature bushes and trees, with 2 old people sitting in a porch swing holding hands while the sun set behind them. It was Freddie and the woman, heavily made up. It won awards. We were in the big time, but we weren't big time. With the band being so large, we had to stay 2 to a room. Imagine the surprise when Moira and I found out we were roommates. We asked Freddie about it, and he seemed surprised. Frank and Amber are married, so obviously they're sharing a room. Sarah and Jenny aren't romantically entangled with anyone I know of, so they share a room. You 2 are obviously together, so we... He stopped and started laughing. You mean you're not? That is to say you haven't. I mean, seriously, you 2 aren't sleeping with each other? Why? You're glued at the hip every time I see you. I'll ask one of you a question and the other answers. If you want, I can switch Moira to Jimmy, and you can split a room with Al. You know he's not straight, right? Before I could answer, Moira decided the issue for me. I don't want Wiley to be tempted to change teams. I've got my own plans for him. The room assignments will be fine just the way they are. Come on, honey, let's go look at our room. We had started out slowly, as we agreed. We went on real dates. It was kind of odd. We rehearsed and arranged for 10 or more hours a day, then went home to the same house, went into separate rooms, got ready, and then went out. We had to move to Nashville for the rehearsals, so we rented a 4-bedroom on a monthly basis. It was Jim, Al, Moira, and me. It was almost as cheap and a lot more comfortable than a motel room. We took turns cooking until we found Al couldn't boil water. We all tried to teach him, but it just didn't take. Jim and Al would go home about every other weekend, so they could see their loved ones. Jim and Moira's parents had retired to Ireland, so she had no one to visit. Every other weekend we had the house to ourselves. We explored. Found out on top of other things Moira was afraid of caves. Went to the home of Andrew Jackson. Hit a few of the well-known bars that hosted open mic night. No one knew who we were, so we did a few songs just for fun. One Saturday, Freddie got us tickets to the Grand Ole Opry. It was great. Some of the legends were there, along with established acts and talented newcomers. Freddie had played there 3 times. We talked, we held hands, we kissed, sometimes pretty intensely, but we slept in separate rooms. I think both of us wanted to be really sure. I did insist we go home once a month. We stayed in my house and spent most of time with my parents. Dottie loved her. She would smile at me when Moira wasn't looking, and the first visit we had, she slipped a small note in my pocket. Read it when you're alone. It was 3 words. She's the one. I still have it. In a bar band, you usually play a place 3 or 4 nights in a row, so the pace is pretty slow. Get there, set your equipment, leave the big stuff, and secure the instruments at night, and you were set. In a tour band, you usually arrive in town the day before, sometimes the day of the show. Your crew sets you up, you come on stage, fine-tune your instruments, and play. Then you hang around backstage or go back to your room. When the show is over, your crew tears it down, packs it up, and the next day you do the whole thing in another town. After a while, it stopped being an adventure, and unless you were on stage, it was pretty boring. It was getting harder and harder to sleep in the same room. At first it was pajamas, but it gradually changed to silk gowns and shorty pajama sets. There was always a steamy goodnight kiss. The feel of her firm body under those gowns didn't help me sleep well. It all came to a head in Oklahoma City, the next to last stop as a warm-up. They had tornado warnings out, and that's a big deal in Oklahoma. The show was over, and we had just gotten to bed when there was an enormous flash of lightning followed by a deafening boom of thunder. I was mostly asleep when Moira dove into my bed, scooting under the covers and hugging me tightly. Did you see that? She sounded like a little girl. I put my arms around her and held her. Relax, honey, it's just a storm. We'll be fine. But we weren't. The wind was blowing so hard you could feel the building sway, and we were 17 stories up. She had flipped on the TV, and there were reports of multiple tornadoes in the immediate area. Moira started to cry. I had read somewhere the safest place to be in a tornado was the smallest room in your house, because the smaller it was, the more structurally stable it would be. I got her up and carried all the blankets into the bathroom, putting them into the tub. Thankfully, it was a big tub. I snuggled us down and wrapped her in my arms. Hush now, I won't let anything happen to you. I have too many plans for you. I gave her a big kiss and she returned it. I was rubbing my hands over her back, her smooth arms, and the sides of the body. After a couple of minutes, she pulled back and hugged me tighter, murmuring into my chest. What kind of plans? It was spoken in a flirty voice, but had undertones of seriousness. I had stopped caressing her, and she took my hands and started moving them again. I was more than willing to continue. Sure you want to hear them? I try to keep it light. I plan on loving you for the rest of your life. I plan on making your life so happy you can't wait to see me or hear my voice, and never being out of arm's reach for the rest of your life. I felt the trickle of tears slide down my chest. I lifted her face up until we were nose to nose. We felt the building lurch and she flinched and burrowed deeper into my embrace. Most of all, when this night is over, I plan on you wearing the ring I've been carrying around in my pocket for the last 2 months. Marry me, Moira. Make us complete. She was so surprised she forgot to be scared. Are you sure? Not the answer I wanted. Well, since you put it like that, let me think about it for a few more years. I'll get back to you. I had forgotten how large the hands were on that small body. She started pounding on my chest. Out, get out of the tub. I want my ring and I want right now. Move your butt. But honey, what about the storm? Screw that storm. Ring. Now. Move. I went back into the bedroom and got the ring out of the suitcase I had hidden it in. I messed with her head a little. Damn, I could have sworn I put it in the dresser. Maybe it's in my jeans. No, maybe it's in my suitcase. She was standing in the door of the bathroom, literally hopping from one foot to the other, flinching every time she saw it lightning. I started feeling a little guilty, so I held the box up for her to see. Found it. She grabbed me at the door and dragged me back to the tub. After we had settled in with her more or less on top of me, she tilted her head back and kissed my cheek. Well, what? Are you going to give me my ring? No, it's not yours yet. What do you mean it's not mine yet? Why not? Because I haven't heard an answer yet. All I've heard is, I want my ring. That's not an answer. She wriggled around until we were face to face. Ask me again. All this talk made me forget the question. Well, in this case, I can't get down on one knee, but Moira O'Sullivan. She had taken her maiden name back after the divorce. Will you marry me? Oh, that question. I'd like to think about it for a while, but since that's pretty much all I've thought about for the last 4 months, I believe I can make an informed decision. Yes, Wiley Patterson, I would love to marry you. Now give me that ring, and I mean right this second. So we got engaged in a bathtub on the 17th floor of a hotel in Oklahoma City, right in the middle of an F2 tornado. It wasn't candlelight around a king-size bed, but we made do. I didn't get to explore her fully that night. I learned the trips we made to the gym in various cities had paid off with a nice body. I also found her hands to have a lot more talent than guitar playing. We were cuddled in exhaustion when she noticed the storm had passed, but we were happy where we were. We were late getting to breakfast. Everyone stopped eating and stared. Cheers broke out. Nikki, our violin player, was dancing around, singing, I won, pay up, suckers. We kind of stood there, with the deer in the headlights look, before Moira asked what she was talking about. Jimmy was grinning. When are they finally gonna do it pool? I thought it wouldn't happen this soon. You guys are kind of slow sometimes. On the bright side, it looks like I win the engagement pool. All the girls immediately went into full marriage mode and dragged her off to admire the ring and start talking about wedding plans. We gave our last performance as a warm-up band the next night and went home. The headliner wasn't sorry to see us go. We kind of tore the crowd up. Papers and magazines were interviewing Freddie more and more, and he gave a lot of credit to us. By then he had released Walking After Midnight, and it became his third top 10 hit in just 7 months. He was suddenly the hot act in country music, and his management team was already putting together his first headliner tour. We all went home for 2 weeks. Moira and Dottie made and remade wedding plans. When the smoke cleared, it was to be an outdoor wedding in the little state park I was so fond of. You could rent an area for group events that included a large pavilion. We tried to keep it small. I invited my shrink and her spouse, my lawyer, and a few more of my old college friends. Moira had a few close friends she used as bridesmaids, and the balance of attendees were somehow music-related. I did invite my favorite nurse and a few more from the hospital. Jimmy was my best man. Freddie, Al, Frank, and the rest of the men in our band were ushers. Beside her old friends, Sarah, Amber, Jenny, and Nikki were also bridesmaids. Dottie was matron of honor, testament to how quickly they bonded, and my dad gave her away. Her mother was ill and they couldn't make the flight, but we promised part of our honeymoon would be spent in Ireland with them. People were amazed we were getting married so quickly. The truth of the matter was Moira got pregnant the first night we made love. She hadn't been with a man in a long time, so she went off the pill. We were both so excited, protection never entered our mind. It was kind of funny. The first serious discussion we had after getting engaged was about children. I was almost 32, and she was almost 35. We knew the older we were, the more dangerous it was for her to get pregnant, and we both were hesitant. I wanted kids, and Moira said she was ready to be a mom again. We agreed that after our first year we would seriously look at adoption, at least 2. Looked like the first one was going to be homemade. The whole band played for us before the regular wedding band we hired played. Love songs, sung by Freddie and Jenny. Because Freddie was getting so popular, we even had a few reporters show up. They were polite, though, and even attended the reception. We ended up in a few fan magazines, background to Freddie being interviewed, and we got some really nice additional wedding photos out of it. We spent 2 weeks in Ireland with her folks. It was a blast. Her parents were nice, and the small town they lived in treated us like celebrities. That was probably due to her mother bragging about the country music star Moira was becoming. It seems American country music had a big following, and the video of How Could You Love Me was very popular. A local TV morning show even had us on, introducing us as the up-and-coming music star and hometown girl Moira Patterson and her husband. It embarrassed Moira to death, but it was all I could do to keep from laughing as they gushed over her. We even went to the local pub a few times with her folks and played with the house band. When we got back home, we had to go right to work. With Freddie, I had picked out the songs for his Western Swing tribute album. 3 Bob Wills tunes, a couple from Milton Brown, a great Mexican polka, Jesse, from the Texas Wanderers, and 2 more from lesser-known groups. Freddie wanted an original, and by then he was convinced I could write anything on demand. I came up with Moonlight in Tennessee, a slow waltz. Freddie actually helped, along with Moira, and of course she did the arranging. Most of the band had gone back home while Freddie did personal appearances and the talk show circuit, so we laid most of the instrumental tracks down at my little studio. I took some of my songwriting money and expanded it. Finally, we went back to Tennessee to add the vocals and polish it up. We spent most afternoons rehearsing to get the live sound tight, and many of the evenings on the record. I was very protective of Moira, but she would laugh and say she was fine. She wasn't far enough along to worry about anything but morning sickness. I still kept a close eye on her. Finally, it was done, and we took a short vacation before starting the tour. When we first came back to Tennessee, I was pleased to hear from an old friend. It was the nurse I had grown close to while Kara was dying. "Wiley, honey, how are you? Dottie gave me your number. I hope you don't mind. I hear you finally got married. Congratulations." "Yes, we're all fine. Thanks for asking. We live here now. My husband and I work at St. Jude's. Remember how you used to come and sing for the kids? We get all kinds of entertainers here, but most are just here for a photo op. What I wouldn't give to see you come through the door with your guitar." She rambled on for a while, and after inviting us out to their house, hung up. We did go to see them. Her kids were all grown. 2 were nurses. 1 was a doctor. It was a pleasant evening, and as we drove home, Moira was pensive. I asked her, and she said she hoped we would be as in love when we got their age. I kissed her and told her to ask me that again in about 40 years. A few days later, she asked me, out of the blue, if I miss going to the hospital to play for the kids. Yes, I do. It was a big part of my life for a long time, you know? What we're doing, what we've become, it's very satisfying. But it wouldn't make the least bit of difference to those kids if Elvis himself came to see them, if he could make them smile for a few minutes and give them a bright spot to remember in their normally gray lives. I didn't think any more about it until 3 days later when she handed me a package. "What's this?" "It's your menstrual suit. I got your mom to ship it up. I talked to Cora, the nurse, and she said come anytime. So, when are we going?" Damn, I wish I could love this woman even more. We set it up for a Thursday, simply because it was my favorite day of the week. I surprised Moira by handing her a package. "What's this?" "It's your costume. You don't think I'm going around in tights while you wear jeans. It would spoil the effect." It was a dress, green satin. The skirt was layered to look like leaves, while the top was form-fitting and had one shoulder bare. There were matching tights and silver slippers with little bells. Even with her 3.5-month bump, she was so beautiful it made my eyes water. What am I? Silly girl, you're a genuine fairy. Come all the way from Ireland to spread cheer and give comfort. She twirled before the mirror. With her red hair, green eyes, and slightly pointed ears, she looked like she had just stepped off the pages of a storybook. We got off the elevator and Cora was standing there with a huge smile. "Come on. I promised these people a treat." She showed us a lounge we could change in, chattering the whole way. "Wiley, remember when you were 14 and I told you someday I would be listening to your songs on the radio? This is one time in my life when I can take great joy in saying I told you so." We changed. I looked at her and realized that for the rest of my life, I would be standing in the shadow of her beauty. And I was more than okay with that. We carried our gear to the ward day room. Heads turned as we passed. The kids stopped chattering when we came in. They didn't know quite what to make of us. Cora made the introductions. "Kids, remember the minstrel we read about in the storybook yesterday? Well, this a real live, genuine minstrel, and he brought a special friend all the way from Ireland. This is Moira, Queen of the Fairies." Wow. Now she was royalty. We played the simple songs, the silly songs, the songs they liked. They liked me, but they flocked to her, touching shyly, almost in awe. She patted hands and hugged everyone. Occasionally, I would see tears in her eyes and knew she was thinking of Erin. One little girl, maybe 3 or 4, sat quietly in a corner. She would smile occasionally, but never joined in. We took a short break and Moira asked Cora about her. We knew from experience the bald head was a bad sign. "That's April. She's here all alone. Her father is a single parent and has 2 more at home. Because he has to support the other 2 and there is no other relatives, he has to leave her alone for extended periods of time. It's killing both of them." She asked what the father's name was and told me to get my mandolin. She walked up to the little girl. "April, you know I'm a fairy, right? The queen, actually." She nodded her head, shyly. One of the advantages of being the queen of the fairies is the ability to read thoughts from a long distance. "I've been getting a message from your father, Tim." Her eyes got wide at the mention of his name. She reached down and stood her up. "You have to stand for this message. Now, hold your arms out." Moira held her arms out wide and April did the same. "Your dad says to tell you he misses you terribly, and he loves you this much." She held her arms out even wider. I knew instantly where this was going. So when she started singing, I was right there with the mandolin. "I love you this much. My heart melts at your touch, and I'll be strong enough, 'cause I love you this much." She had modified the lyrics a little to fit the occasion, but it sounded just as good. It was our lullaby. We used to sing it to each other almost every night we were on tour. She took her hand and put it in the boy standing beside her, and almost hypnotically he reached for the child beside him. Soon everyone in the room, kids, Doctors, parents, were holding each other's hands as widely as they could. By the time she had done all 5 verses, most had tears in their eyes. One, a doctor in his late 50s, was crying openly. He said later he was thinking of his wife, who had just passed. Moira had been twirling slowly. As the last chords lingered, she knelt and picked up April, who was crying. Well, like the baby she was. "Your daddy loves you, April. Be strong for him." She nodded, and then buried her head in her shoulder and tried to hug her harder. The spell was broken by a voice at the door. "What's all this? I didn't know there was another act here. Does this mean I don't have to do this, Bob?" It was Freddie's producer, along with one of his other clients, a young woman with a minor hit who he was thinking about producing. He was there as a favor to her manager. She seemed indifferent and a little stoned. I could tell from the look on Bob's face her chances of working with him were getting slimmer. He told her to go on home, and one of the agent's assistants stayed to try doing damage control. He followed us as we said our goodbyes. It took a while. Seems everyone wanted to thank us, hug us. I even got a kiss or two. Cora made us promise on pain of death to return soon. As soon as we got changed, Bob charged into the room. "I suppose that was one of yours?" I only nodded. "I've got the perfect singer. She's..." "No, the only one who gets to sing this is Moira. No one else, don't bother. If she wants to record it, she will. Otherwise, it stays a private lullaby." Both looked at me with stunned faces. Bob tried to bluster. "We agreed. I get first choice, remember?" "No. You offered me a retainer, but I didn't take it. Most songs it won't matter, but some are special to me, and I'll choose who sings it." No discussion. And that's how Fairy was born. After Bob saw I wasn't giving the song to anyone else, he begged to produce it. "This one is bigger than anything else you've written. When did you come up with this one?" Moira was laughing. "When he was 12. What? You've been writing songs of this quality since you were 12? Please tell me you've got a 20-year stockpile just like it." By now I was grinning. "Oh, I may have 1 or 2 lying around." He went into full business mode. "Have you got enough to fill an album? Are you gonna do it as a duo, or is it just gonna be Moira? When can we start?" "Yes, I don't know, and it depends. She's going to be almost 8 months along before Freddie's tour ends. I will not put too much strain on her. We'll talk it over and let you know. We would love for you to produce it, but I want Mel to engineer it. He did the instrumental tracks for his album, and I trust him." After he left, I asked Moira what she thought. "I don't know. We're having fun just being in the band. I don't know how far this will go. I'm sure it'll be a hit. Do you want to be a star?" "Oh no. If we do this, you'll be the star. You'll be singing it, you're beautiful, and the spotlight will be on you. Are you up for it?" She absently rubbed her tummy. "I think so. It's like a teenage fantasy come true. As long as we don't endanger our son, I'd like to give it a try." Yes, it was a boy. I was secretly pleased that she would get a chance to shine. I was already reviewing songs in my head. We recorded Aaron's song over the next week. I changed the title because I didn't want any allegations for copyright infringement from the book, though I did acknowledge as partial inspiration for the song. It wasn't a duo. It was Moira, me, Jimmy, Al, and Jenny. The name was chosen by me, and I thought the old English spelling suited it better. We got the genius who did Freddie's videos to work with us on ours. He heard Bob describe the scene at the hospital and ran with it. We filmed it at St. Jude's, with permission, and it started out in the day room where we first sang it. Moira was in her fairy outfit. I was dressed as a minstrel. She picked up April as she sang and had her open her arms. Soon all the children were joined by the doctors, nurses, orderlies, and parents in the room. She went out in the hall, where more hands were joined. By the end of the video, she had gone down the stairs, out onto the sidewalk, and down the street. She went all the way around the building and back inside, eventually ending up back in the day room. I'm not sure how many volunteer extras he used. We ended the song with Moira holding April, giving a plea to help support the hospital. He also did the CD cover. We hadn't really thought about it, but one Saturday he was driving by one of those little county courthouses so common in the South. It was on a slight rise and the lawn sloped away. It was freshly mown and had rained several days before. Mushrooms usually pop up a few days afterwards. It was almost a perfect circle of crisp white mushrooms. A fairy circle. Folklore had it you would find treasure at the center. When he called us, almost screaming to get her outfit and get over there before he lost the perfect light. We did. He had already called his crew to set up the cameras and reflectors. When we got there, he had measured and put Moira right in the center, with her knees drawn up like she was in deep thought. He got about 15 shots in before the cops asked us to leave. He had to go back the next week to get retroactive permission for the shoot. I looked at the photos and decided there was a treasure in the center. We named that CD Circle. We didn't finish the project until after we had the baby. Aaron James Patterson. It was a disappointment to me he didn't have red hair, but otherwise he was just perfect. And his auburn hair had red highlights in the summertime. Fred had decided to retire the Chance Blaze persona and start using his real name. Freddie Johnson and the Smyrna Playboys and Girls got rave reviews. Western swing was having a resurgence, and we were very popular. The CD sold well, not epic proportions, but that style of music didn't appeal to everyone. We got tired of wearing those Western suits pretty fast, so we would play the first half of a show as a Western swing band, then take a 15-minute intermission and come back in regular clothes and finish the show doing his hits. He started closing the show with Twisting the Night Away. It put everyone in a good mood for the trip home. As her tummy grew, Moira moved less, and in the end she sat on a stool through most of the songs. At one time I almost made her leave the tour and go home. She was taking her vitamins and getting her rest, and insisted she was fine. The other girls, in fact all of us, watched her like a hawk. She was a little snappy from time to time, said she was tired of being smothered. I would let her vent on me mostly, then hug and rock her, whispering silly nothings in her ear until she started giggling. This probably sounds glamorous and exciting, and it was, to a point. But mostly it was just hard, repetitive work. Before the show I would work on songs for Fairy, as well as songs for Freddie's next album, sometimes putting 16-hour days in. Moira would fuss and I would stop for a while, but as soon as she was asleep I would start again. The hardest thing about touring is the boredom. Fly here, do a show. Drive there, do a show. The normal routines of life were so disrupted, sometimes you didn't even know what day it was, or even where you were at. Some of us would hit the gym, go to movies, museums, or read. Freddie, Sarah, and Barry, one of the horn players, were golfers and would try to play as often as they could. Sarah, Jenny, and Nikki were single, as well as half the guys, so romantic entanglements were inevitable. It was none of my business, but I gave them all fair warning. Keep it away from the band. If trouble or jealousies developed, home they went. I did have a serious talk with one of the horn players who was paying too much attention to Amber. Her husband Frank hadn't noticed it yet, but sooner or later he would, so I gave him an option. Stop or leave the band. He stopped. After what seemed like forever it was time for the last show. We were in Atlanta, and the last 5 shows we did were sold out. The show was on Friday, and management talked us into doing one more on Saturday afternoon. It sold out in 5 hours. I liked to read newspapers and had a habit of picking one up wherever we were. It soothed me to read about people who didn't have to be 500 miles away tomorrow, or on the opposite coast the next. I always read the classifieds. My habit of looking for guitars had never died. There was an ad for a community yard sale in a small park, and one of the items listed was old guitars. I told Moira, who like everyone else was craving normalcy, and we decided to go. Freddie wanted to go, and so did Sarah. So we rented a car and went. It was great. For a little while, we were just 2 average couples out for a morning of leisurely fun. The yard sale was a lot bigger than I thought. Spread throughout the park, it easily covered 2 acres. We stayed together for a while, but soon Freddie and Sarah wandered away, holding hands. I nudged Moira and she just smiled. How long? Since Chicago. They look good together, don't they? They did, but road romances rarely lasted. I wished them the best. I found the guitars. 2 cheap Japanese models, but one old electric K. I bought it, not even arguing the price. They agreed to hold it while we looked, so we slowly rambled, holding hands. Occasionally someone would congratulate us. Moira was pretty big by now. She just glowed, at least to me. We came to a table with a big banner. Baby cakes, cupcakes, help me see Freddie Johnson. We couldn't help it, we went over. There was a girl, 12 or 13 maybe, and her mom. I have to admit, the cupcakes did look good. The woman said hi. The girl was busy with a customer, but just as soon as she was done, she came over. She looked at Moira hard. Anyone ever tell you that you look just like Moira Patterson, the guitar player for Freddie Johnson? She looked at me, but nothing registered. I had on a ball cap and sunglasses, not because of fear of being recognized, but because it was sunny and I didn't want a sunburned scalp. Moira just smiled. I get that a lot. Must not be that many red-haired guitar players in the world. Could we get a couple cupcakes? She had 8 different flavors. Moira got red velvet with cream cheese icing. After tasting a sample, I went with prune. Moira looked at me funny until she tasted a sample, then she had to have one of those too. What's in this? The girl smiled. A good baker never reveals her recipes, but I will tell you it has a spice cake base, and the cream cheese icing has a little sweetened prune juice in it. You do know his shows are sold out, right? She sighed. I know, but I'm hoping we'll make enough money to get 2 tickets from a scalper. But they want twice the price, and I don't think I'll make that much. I did some quick calculations. 14 band members, 6 crew, security guys, stadium workers, management. Say 60 to 70. We might can help you out. Think you can have 200 cupcakes by 4 this afternoon? Her eyes got huge. Are you serious, mister? Moira stepped in. Sure we are, honey. I want 50 red velvet, and I'm sure my husband wants that mini prune. We've got some friends here. Let me call them over and see what flavors they'd like. She called Sarah and told them to come over to the east side of the park, near the picnic shelter. They came over, still hand in hand. Freddie was like me, ball cap and glasses, but his was so no one would recognize him. They took in the banner and started grinning. Guys, taste these. Aren't they great? Which flavor do you like best? They tasted the samples. The girl was looking at Freddie closely, frowning. Sarah was a chocoholic, so she wanted 50 of the double chocolate. Fred chose peach, an unusual flavor, but it was Atlanta after all. Suddenly, her face fell. Moira noticed. What's wrong? We don't have a car. Are you going to pick them up? Sure we will. I'll send a car over. Give me the address. She was still looking distressed. Could you, pay half up front? I need to buy more flour and sugar. We gave her the full amount. While we were doing that, Freddie had the mom off to the side. Her hands flew to her mouth and tears came to her eyes. She was composed, though, when she came back. Her smile was just slightly bigger than a mile wide. When we got back to the car, Sarah and Moira gave us both a kiss. We know what you two were thinking. You're really good men. You know that? Moira slapped me on the shoulder when I asked her if she was willing to put that in the writing. We let the rest of the band in on the plan. We had brought all the cupcakes she had back, and a mini sugar ensued. I wished we had filmed it. Her mom said she cried when the limo pulled up. The driver told them he was supposed to deliver them and the cupcakes to the address he was given, and to please dress suitably. They put on their best dresses, loaded the cupcakes, and were off. The first stop was one of the best restaurants in town. The driver instructed them to go in. They were expected. Her mom said she looked like she was going to her execution. When they were seated, the waiter told them to order anything they wanted. The bill was already taken care of. Mom got lobster. The girl, Julie, asked for a burger, but her mom said no. Order something she had never had. She ordered lobster also. After dinner, they were delivered to the stadium. Julie saw Freddie's name in lights and started crying. The limo pulled around back to the artist entrance. Security gathered the cupcakes and the girls and took them backstage. Freddie met her and told her he was always glad to meet a big fan. He apologized for not being able to get her a ticket and asked her if hanging around with us backstage would be all right. She still hadn't stopped crying but nodded yes. The girls and her mom took her to the dressing room to clean her face. She finally stopped crying and the girls put a little light makeup on her. She and her mom stood just off stage for the whole show. Fred would look over every once in a while and wink. At the end of the show, they brought 2 stools out and put them center stage. Freddie put down his guitar and grabbed a mic. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to what is probably my biggest fan and the best cupcake maker I know. Please welcome hometown girl Julie Franklin. Julie froze. The girls led her gently out to the stool. Freddie took the other stool and held her hand. Julie, this song is for you. Bring Out the Boogie in Me was an old blues song by the great duo Sonny Terry and Brownie McGee. It was a feel-good song that he was putting on his next CD, and we gave it the full big band treatment. When he sang the last verse, he sang it just to her. When you woo like that, when you coo like that, you shake my peaches down from the tree. You're my sweet cupcake maker, and you bring out the boogie in me. He leaned over and gave her a kiss on the cheek while we played, and had her stand with him and wave as he said goodnight. The crowd ate it up. He released the live video to promote his next CD. It made Julie and her mom minor celebrities, and their cupcakes became so popular they opened a shop. Every time he or Ferry came to town, they had standing backstage passes. We went home, tired but satisfied. Took a little time off while waiting for the baby. I was still working on the songs for our first effort. I wouldn't let Moira work, which pissed her off no end. I did relent and gave her the songs to arrange as I got them, but no more than 3 hours a day. She was working on an arrangement while I was writing a lyric down when she missed a note. She never misses a note. I looked up. She was smiling and crying at the same time. Honey, let's go. My water just broke. The nurses said it was one of the easiest labors they had seen in a while, but it was still 5 hours before he came. I held her hands, and when she got close, the doctor told her to vent, yell, or scream. It would help with the pain. She was looking into my eyes. You son of a witch. I hate you. When I get out of here, I'm gonna shove a guitar up your butt and see how you like it. Oh God. Here he comes. I love you, honey. I love you. It ended as a scream, them mumbling over and over, I love you. I love you. I love you. Tears flowed as I put our new son on his mother's breast, and suddenly I had to sit down. I went pale and the nurses were laughing. Put your head between your legs and breath. You'll be okay in a minute. Thankfully I was. Moira delivered a week early, so Dad and Dottie didn't get to be there at the birth. Mom was pissed but got over it instantly when she got her hands on her grandson. Dad just stood there with a stunned look on his face. Tears ran down his cheeks when he touched Aaron's hand, and it curled around his little finger. Dad retired, and they moved to Nashville. Dottie said no way she was going to be away from him while he grew up. They bought a house nearby, which I thought was a waste because they were always at our house. We finished the first CD. Aaron's song went to #1 on the pop and country charts. We redid Perfect as a duet between Moira and Jenny, and it charted at 5 before dropping off. Hanging on the End of a Kiss, one I wrote and Jenny sang, went to 3 on the country charts and 1 on the pop charts. Life was good. No, my life was great. We were successful, pretty well off, and loved each other and our son madly. After we finished our album, we concentrated on Freddie's. We had a few tracks down, and they were good solid songs, but none of them were hits. I was going over old songs I had one day when Fred came by. He looked like hell, bleary-eyed, moving slow. He piled into a chair and laid his head back. What happened to you? He grunted. I think my truck got drunk last night. I looked out in the driveway. He had a 1984 four-wheel drive Silverado that he had restored and loved more than was reasonable. Usually a shining silver, it was covered with mud. Don't tell me you drove last night? Nah, Sarah drove us home. She's a little pissed. We went down to the bar last night and some guy was bragging about his Dodge. I had enough beer in me to challenge him, and we went to the pits. The pits was a four-wheel drive park, where several acres were constantly kept muddy. People paid a fee and slung mud to their heart's content. What happened? Hell, we both ended up stuck. To add insult to injury, some girl in a hopped-up Jeep pulled us loose enough to get out. Damn, my head hurts. I just grinned and left him to nap on my chair. The next day I gave him the first draft of his next hit. Think my truck got drunk last night. Pretty sure he started a fight with a Jeep and a big Dodge Ram. Things got out of hand. Started talking trash. Wrote checks my gas had to cash. Ended up slinging mud. We were out for blood. 3 more verses followed. He laughed his butt off. Moira gave it a good beat with a lot of steel guitar. We probably had more fun doing that video than any we've done before or since. We used his truck, a big Dodge Dually, and a monster Jeep painted bright pink. JT, our video genius, filmed at a bar in the pits. I don't know how he did it, but he got the Mattel people to let us use the Barbie logo on the Jeep. Singers are almost as superstitious as baseball players. Freddie insisted Moira and I be in his videos for luck. So I drove the Dodge, and Moira had the Jeep. We had stunt drivers for the serious stuff. Remember the old Alan Jackson video where he walked through the mudsling without getting any on his white shirt? We borrowed that idea, and he even did a cameo where he was standing beside the pit in a white shirt while mud hit everyone but him. While the 2 trucks got covered with mud, through the magic of cameras and computers, the Jeep never got a speck on it. She even pulled the trucks out. At the very end, Moira stepped out of the Jeep wearing the black and white one-piece swimsuit that was on the original 1958 Barbie. She had lost the baby weight, and at 37 she still looked amazing. Mattel even put out the Jeep and a reissue of the original Barbie as a tie-in. Sales were through the roof, and 100 were signed by Moira and Freddie and distributed randomly. Moira had so much fun she wanted the Jeep, so the monster ended up sitting in our driveway. As Aaron got older, whenever she went somewhere he would cry, "Jeep, Mommy, Jeep." He loved it. On the subject of cars, remember when I said I had another car stored at my storage buildings? It was a 1970 Grandee Mustang, generally acknowledged as the girl model of Mustang. It belonged to my grandmother, the only new car she ever owned. She loved them when they first came out, but couldn't afford one. A few pay increases later, and after an enormous amount of overtime, my grandfather bought it for her to commemorate their 20th anniversary. She told me she cried for a week. It meant more to her than anything he had ever given her. She was going to give it to my mother, but when she was killed in the accident, she promised it to me, to be given to my wife when we married. Oddly enough, I never thought once about giving it to Sammy. Moira cried when I gave it to her as a wedding present and told her the history. Nobody, not even me, was allowed to drive it. If she was going anywhere alone, it was her favorite transportation. Life flowed smoothly. We were working on the next Fairy album, and one night I noticed Jenny was looking down. Moira had to get Aaron and take him home, and the others drifted off. I asked her what was bothering her. Today would have been my 5th wedding anniversary. I didn't know she had been married. She was about 25, and I really didn't have much contact with her after her guitar lessons. Want to talk about it? I asked her gently. Not much to tell. We got married right out of high school. We couldn't find good jobs, so Jerry got this idea we should both enlist. We could do our hitch and come back with a skill and some college money. The plan went to pieces when he couldn't pass his physical. Heart murmur. We had gone to different recruiters, so I didn't know until after I had signed the papers. I ended up in the military and he didn't. After basic, I was assigned to a motor brigade and shipped out. We cried our eyes out, him, me, and my best friend. I made her promise to watch over him because of his heart condition. I was a rear echelon driver, shuttling officers and VIPs around. At first, the emails and letters came almost every day. Then they slowed, and then she stopped communicating with me completely. I started getting a bad feeling, but what could I do? I might have as well been a million miles away. When I got home from the first tour, they met me. She was 8 months pregnant. It was his. Tears flowed freely now. I sat beside her and held her, feeling outrage at her betrayal. I loved him so much. Her too. We were closer than sisters. I sucked it up, did another tour, went home and finished my enlistment. But it still hurts, even after all this time. We stayed together for a little while, and she thanked me for being there, then went home. I sat there alone in the studio, thinking about the unfairness of life. When it hit me, I was above average as a songwriter. I even had a few articles written about me in several music magazines. I got a plan, Aaron's song, and My Truck Got Drunk Last Night, and a few more were successful. But every writer hopes there is a monster in him somewhere. A song so strong that even if they never knew who wrote it, they would always remember it. Jenny gave me my monster. I never went home. Moira called me about 11 and told me to get my butt home. I told her I was onto something. She knew how I wrote, so she told me not to stay up all night. Some songs take time. A lyric here, 6 months later one there. Until one day it's finished. Some songs are like mining for gold or jewels. You hope it's buried in there somewhere, so you keep digging. And some just flow out of you like water from a spring. A million miles away, flew from me like a burst dam. I woke Moira up about 7:30 the next morning. When the sleep cleared her eyes, she looked at me. Jesus, Wiley, did you come to bed last night? I was still on a riding high. Just got home. Here. I gave her a printout of the lyrics and chord progressions. Tweak this, but not much. I'm taking a shower and sleeping for a while. Wake me about noon. I looked at her sleep-tousled hair. I gave her a deep, soul-touching kiss. When we came up for air, her eyes were sparkling. What was that for? For never being a million miles away. Huh. Never mind. I resumed kissing her and was tugging her gown over her head when Erin woke up crying. She slid her gown back down. Sorry, love, but somebody wants breakfast. I picked her up off the bed and twirled her around before setting her down and handing her robe. This will continue without interruption very soon. I went off to shower and sleep. She let me sleep until 3, then did the same thing I did. Except she was naked. Erin is with your mom. Time for you to prove up on your morning promises. We didn't leave the bed until 5. After we finally got up and got something to eat, Moira started. It's powerful stuff, Wiley. Maybe the best thing you've ever written. I was almost in tears working through it. Where did it come from? Jenny. It's basically her story. I told her the story. It made her angry. Damn them. She didn't deserve that. Nobody does, honey. But it happens a lot. If it didn't, a lot of country writers would be out of business. We got Jenny to the side and asked her to stay after everyone left. Moira played it for her. She burst into tears and ran from the studio. 10 minutes later, just when we were going to look for her, she came back. Jenny hugged me for about 5 minutes before reaching for Moira and hugging us both. Finally, she stepped back. God, Wiley, that's my life story. You came up with this last night? Well, it took all night, actually. Took me that long to get it right. Even dreamed up the video for it while I slept. Enough about that. I want you to sing it, Jenny. Not as part of Ferry or Freddie's band, but as Jenny Green solo. Can you handle that? Moira looked surprised. I think she wanted to sing it, but she told me later she couldn't have done the job Jenny did. A Million Miles Away was a crossover hit. It went to #1 on the pop charts, #1 on the country charts, and was #1 on the British charts at the same time. The video was amazing. The first scene was of Jenny, her husband, and her friend saying goodbye when she shipped out. Then it went to a split screen for a while, showing Jenny in Iraq on one side and her husband and friend on the other. It gradually showed the friend and husband getting together while Jenny was getting shot at. Then it dissolved into one screen, with her friend and husband in bed while she stood at the foot in her uniform with sand swirling around her, singing, "If you're gonna stray, there's nothing I can say that would matter anyway, 'cause I'm a million miles away." It dissolved into another scene where the best friend is sitting up in bed while the husband sleeps singing. I know that it was wrong when he started coming on, but I'm just not that strong, and we just keep on going on. The next scene shows her coming home to be met by her husband and her very pregnant best friend. The husband looks at her and sings, "There's nothing I could say that could take the pain away. Now I'll see you every day. Wish I was a million miles away." The final scene shows Jenny sitting on her bunk in a green t-shirt and fatigues, picking out the notes on an acoustic guitar with tears in her eyes. She looks up and sees a poster hanging on the wall that shows 3 soldiers in full combat gear with the logo, Army Strong. She gets a determined look on face, and it fades to her on stage with her black Les Paul, doing power chords and singing, "Na na, na na, a million miles away." That dissolves into a scene at a local army base where the soldiers are singing it in time as they march. The whole video lasted 9.5 minutes. The actual song was only just about 4. It became the unofficial anthem of the Iraq and Afghanistan conflict. Go on any base anywhere around the world, and you'll find it on the jukebox. Suddenly, I had to come up with an album's worth of songs for her solo project. Jenny had a couple she wrote that were pretty good. We did a couple of covers. Bob gave her a song another writer he was working with, and I gave her You Should Have Held On, my song about Sandy betraying me. I've gotten long-winded, sorry. I'll wrap it up. Moira and I were on the cover of Guitar Player magazine, surrounded by our guitars, our 2 Grammys together, my 3 on my own, and our 4 CMA awards. She got a contract from Fender to furnish her guitars. I got one from Gibson. Rolling Stone had Freddie, Jenny, Moira, and me on the cover with the caption, Southern Dynasty. Ferry did 2 more albums, Dust, and a live album with 3 studio tracks, called Tales, before hanging it up. Jenny still records and tours, as does Freddie. I nagged Moira into doing a solo project which was well received. She actually opened up for Freddie on one tour, but retired after that because she said it was no fun if I wasn't with her. Horns for Hire made a good living doing studio work, as did Al. I use them quite often. I pretty much retired to run my studio and produce new acts. I learned a lot working with Bob, and he sold me part of his business and pretty much lets me run it, while he scouts new talent as a hobby. So there it is, all sweetness and light. You really think so? Not all the tears we shed were tears of joy. Every garden has snakes, and the larger and richer the garden, the bigger and slimier the snakes. Frank and Amber divorced because the horn player I had warned away on the road decided that since we were home she was fair game. He dumped her afterwards, and she moved back home. Frank stayed and does session work, and is still a part of Freddie's band. The rest of the guys in Horns for Hire were so pissed they threw the guy out. Jenny got married to a loser who tried to take her to the cleaners despite the prenups, saw he was going to lose, stole everything he could from her, and disappeared. She's seeing someone now who is serious, a rapper of all things, who treats her like gold. We'll see if it works out. The worst thing of all was what happened to my best friend and brother-in-law. Crystal wouldn't leave our hometown, so Jimmy did a lot of commuting. Luckily, the older kids were in high school and could help their mom, but things became strained. Jimmy came to us after the last Fairy album and said he was retiring. The money he made he had invested with Moira's ex, of all people. Apparently he approved of the rock and roll lifestyle if it paid well. It allowed him to buy half interest in the guitar shop we used to do business with. They were going to expand and he was going to teach drums. Things had been really tense between he and Crystal, and he was sure his career change and being home all the time would fix it. He had kept it secret to surprise her. He walked into his house unexpectedly with flowers to give her the good news, only to catch her in bed with someone else. Enraged, he started fighting. The guy managed to get away from him long enough to get his gun and shot and killed him. Crystal was screaming and trying to get the gun away when it went off and shot her. She lasted for a week before passing. The guy was a cop and shot them with his service weapon. He got convicted of 2 counts of second-degree murder. He'll be 67 before he's eligible for parole. Jenny and Freddie sang at the funeral. We got the kids. One was just starting college, 2 were in high school. Jan was in middle school, and the baby was in the 2nd grade. We didn't have to adopt for Aaron to have brothers and sisters. I had always been close to Jan, and after a year she and Susie, the youngest, were calling us mom and dad. It was bittersweet. There was a rift in the relationship between Fred and I that took a long time to heal. He had been living with Sarah for a few years and bought her an engagement ring. For months before the wedding, the gossip magazines linked him with a young singer just 21. He denied there was anything to it until Sarah caught them together and moved out. The singer rode the publicity hard and then dumped him. He stayed away from me for a while because he knew I was pissed. It kind of came to a head when Sarah, with no place to go and no money, moved in with us. She told me one night it came as a complete surprise to her, but even if she had known, it would have still hurt as bad. I thought about that for a few days and wrote, "If I'd seen I coming." I gave it to a well-known singer with a deep baritone voice. We did the video with him sitting on a stool singing while I played piano. Frank played a mournful steel, and Sarah and Nikki played violin. It was powerful. As he sang the last verse, if you watch the video, you can make out the tears in Sarah's eyes. You thought it was sweet. Your surprise was complete when I realized I'd been had. But who am I funnying? If I'd seen it coming, it still would have hurt just as bad. Yeah, it still would have hurt just as bad. It went Diamond and I got a CMA for Song of the Year, my third. Freddie was livid. He hadn't had a hit for over a year and felt his star was fading. He knew better to come to the house while Sarah was there. So he called and just raised hell. God damn it. Why didn't you give that song to me? I need a hit pretty bad right now. I thought we were tight. I took a few breaths before answering him. We were tight, still are as far as I know. You didn't get the song because it was about Sarah and how hard she took the breakup. You're an idiot. You know that? It's been months and she still cries. No way was I going to reward you for doing what you did to her. He sighed into the phone. You're right. I was and still am an a-hole. I don't know what I was thinking. I've tried to apologize to Sarah, but she refuses to talk to me. Can you help me? Oh no, I'm not going to be your go-between. Maybe she'll calm down and talk to you eventually, but right now you need to give her space. And don't try to rope Moira into this. She's pretty mad at you right now. Any advice? I know I don't deserve her, but I want her back bad. All I can say is you're still a public figure. Give an interview or two and bring it up. She still watches TV. Maybe she'll see it. He was abject and miserable in the interviews. Told the reporter he made the biggest mistake of his life. He actually said me wished he was me, so he could write the perfect apology song. The most compelling statement he made was he wished he could see her one more time, just to say how sorry he was for causing he so much pain. Sarah saw the interviews and came to us for advice. I gave the universal truth. Are you happier without him or with him? Can you forgive him? Does he deserve it? Do you think he'll do it again? Be sure about all of that, and you'll have your answer. She thought about it for a week and asked me one day if he could come over for our once-monthly barbecue. Moira and I told her to do what she wanted. We'd support her. He came, stayed away from her for a while, then gradually worked his way over to her. They said hi and just stared at each other for a second. We watched them pretty closely, and soon they were on a bench talking quietly. They talked for about an hour, and she went inside. He left, but not before hugging Moira and me. He was crying as he thanked us. I thought things went wrong, but Moira went in, then came back with a smile. They have a date tomorrow. They went to a movie and dinner, then she insisted he bring her straight home. I peeked out the window when they got home. Moira laughed at me. Don't worry, Daddy. He's not going to hurt your little girl. I couldn't help it. Force of habit. I went from having one little boy to having him plus 5 girls. 3 teenagers, a preteen and a 7-year-old who was always following her sisters around. Seemed like there was always 1 or 2 teenage boys hanging around the house. I spent many weekend nights not sleeping until the girls were home from their dates. We were rich, not billionaires, but very, very comfortable. When we suddenly inherited 5 kids, we had to find a bigger house. We looked, but couldn't find anything we liked, when an old friend gave us a call. We met Mike and Shauna Hogue at a roadside peach stand. They were on vacation, driving aimlessly in his 1968 Firebird convertible. Shauna and Moira hit it off right away, and I liked Mike. He was huge, 6 feet 6 inches at least, and probably weighed 250 pounds. He was in real estate out west, and was worth about $500 million. We didn't find that out until later. Moira and Shauna exchanged emails, and when we toured out west, we invited them to the shows. I usually read people pretty well, but couldn't get a fix on Mike. He reminded me of me when I was having compartmentalization issues, but I was guessing it went a lot deeper. He did us a favor and found us a house locally that wasn't even listed yet. It belonged to some financial whiz who made some very bad investment decisions. Moira gasped when she saw it the first time. It wasn't a house, it was an estate. 120 acres completely surrounded by a 6-foot chain-link fence. An Olympic-sized swimming pool that could be enclosed, a hot tub and waterfall. A 6-car garage, a 3-bedroom guest house, a 2-bedroom apartment over the garage. The house was 3 stories with a basement. 9 bedrooms, state-of-the-art kitchen, formal living room, dining room, den, and library. 7 bathrooms. Mike got it for about 40% of what it was worth, and it was still more than I ever expected to make in my lifetime. Mom and Dad moved into the guest house so she would never be too far from her grandchildren, and we used the garage apartment for guests. Everybody had privacy, and we converted the basement into a media and playroom, where the kids could hang out and we could keep an eye on everyone. There were 2 ponds and a large creek running through the property, and in the summertime you would find my dad, Aaron, and often Susie, fishing. A tractor and all the equipment came with it, and Dad would amuse himself with a garden, mowing the fields and scraping the driveway when it snowed. We had professional help, he just enjoyed doing it. He lived happily for 10 years before a heart attack took him. Dottie lived another 8 years but was never quite the same. I added one more accomplishment to my resume. I used to tell Aaron a bedroom story about a wandering minstrel and the fairy he fell in love with. I expanded it into a children's book, got a really good illustrator, and published it. It was very well received. I dedicated it to my own personal fairy with all the love I had. Moira and I had only one real problem our whole life together. Freddie got the acting bug and did a few movies. Of course, he made sure we had bit parts, part of his superstition going back to the videos. Moira loved it and started taking acting lessons, and gradually got bigger and bigger parts. Oddly enough, I was offered several parts in other movies. Seems I was a natural, stemming from my early habit of morphing into whatever group I was with when I was younger. I didn't like it when Moira had to go on location, couldn't stand the thought of being away from her. I did do an indie film once while she was on location. Double Shot of Love, about a middle-aged bar owner who was widowed, and his 20-something daughter, who both managed to fall in love with the same man. It was a hit at Sundance and Montreal, and actually made decent money. I got a few offers, but my heart wasn't in it. This was the only time in our relationship that we had serious trouble. My personal snake was named Calvin. He was Moira's manager, and he had his sights set on her from the beginning. I didn't like him, called him Chipmunk, which pissed him off no end. He worked her hard, often on location when I wasn't around. I told Moira, but she laughed it off, saying he didn't mean anything, it was just fun. She was 45 by then, still beautiful, but not a starlet. She was on location when they decided to rewrite the script to include a nude scene. He was trying to get her to do it, saying it was the only way she could compete with the younger actresses. He was spiking her water with a mood inhibitor and had installed hidden cameras in her room and shower. His plan to seduce her went to pieces when Megan flew up to see why we were having trouble talking to her. Alvin tried everything he could think of to keep them apart, but she raised so much hell with the production company that she got to see her. She called me and I immediately chartered a plane and told Megan not to leave her side. I told her in the meantime call Mike Hogue. He only lived an hour away. I don't know who Mike called, but in 45 minutes, 4 very large men with serious attitudes were right behind Megan and Moira. One got her checked into a hospital and had a narcotic screen ran, while one of the others searched her room. He found the minicams, and they found the narcotics used on her in Alvin's room. He declared no knowledge. Then he insisted the narcotics were hers, then said she wanted to be filmed to prepare for the nude scenes. The DA and the judge didn't believe him. No one knew who posted bail, but he disappeared. Permanently. Forever. Never to be seen again. Still think I'm pure as the driven snow? There was a guy in LA who learned the hard way I wasn't. And to quote Forrest Gump, that's all I have to say about that. Moira retired, saying she never wanted to spend another night out of my arms. I still write songs, but not like I did. Moira still appears at a benefit or charity event, and we still play 1 or 2 dates with Freddie and Jenny when they tour just for fun. We spend our days together with the grandkids, 5 to be exact, with 1 on the way and 3 weddings to go before we get more. And we lived happily ever after. Nani's guitars got the highest price for Les Paul guitars up to that date, $638,000. I never did get my Squier back, but I did get my 1969 Mach 1 back, paying almost twice what I sold it for, but he knew I had it and that I wanted it bad. Dear listeners, we have started working on our other 2 channels, Lost Relation Chronicles and Fright Chronicles. Please show your love by subscribing to the channels and help us grow. The links are in the descriptions box. Also, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.